Okay. Welcome to the Kennebunkport Planning Board meeting of August 21st. We seem to be missing Scott, but
Scott came in and said he was ill and went home.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So Scott will not be here this evening, so you find Jens can alternate voting. Okay. All righty. So attendance, as I just said, is Scott is missing, but everybody else is here. We have two sets of minutes. So let me first bring up the a month ago meeting of July 17th. Are there issues with that one? Or?
There were a couple of typos, but I think you can read through them.
Okay. So, can I hear a motion on the minutes of the 17th?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of the 17th.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Okay. Then we have the minutes of the last meeting. Right, somewhere here.
Just do the 17th. Did we just do the 17th?
We have the meeting of
previous.
August 7th, I guess, right?
Yes.
And any problems with that one?
No, it's perfect.
Okay. Hear that? It's perfect.
Don't
Anyway,
change a
so,
thing.
I have a motion.
Okay, I'll move, yeah.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Good. All right, that brings us to item 190603, Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. Tim Spang, authorized agent for approval to remodel existing trail and create a new trail in the, and this is the public hearing on this, which Mr. Spang spent 3 hours waiting for the other night, so he gets to go first.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Tim Spang, just representing the trust. I'm in front of you to present a labyrinth at the trust. It's similar to a maze, and it's off an existing path. That the existing path we would just upkeep and put a new layer on it, so that gets a lot of use, and we're hoping that actually anybody and almost people in a wheelchair can get to this labyrinth. The labyrinth has setbacks of anywhere from 92 feet to 105 feet away from the river, which we have to be, I think it's 75 feet away from the river. We're disturbing about 6,000 square feet to put it in. I don't know, we have all the setbacks, and there's like, I don't know, a lot of people, I don't know if they know what a labyrinth is. A labyrinth, for some people it's just very spiritual, for some people it's just very peaceful. And it's if anyone was able to do it at Prelude last year, it was at the old gristmill, and everyone that's hoping and wants to get this done, there was one there, and it was really nice. And it's just another place to enjoy nature, if nothing else. And I think it'd be great for the community.
Okay. Well, in this case, I will open the public hearing. I'm sorry. Does anybody have any comments from us guys? No. Okay, open the public hearing. Are there any abutters or any residents that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And entertain a motion for approval of this item.
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay. And so, all in favor, I guess we'll start with you, Larry. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, it's approved. I have a finding of facts, which I will read later, and it'll be available from Werner.
In the morning?
Yeah, we'll get it signed later tonight. There's an awful lot of stuff on the
Yep,
on the
that's fine.
agenda at this point.
Warren, as long as I can come in first thing so I can go get that registered.
Yes.
Yep, perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Really
Alrighty.
appreciate it. It
Thank
was
you, Tom.
worth the wait.
Well, I'm glad. Okay,
Nina-
speaking
Nina,
of the
did you-
Conservation Trust,
Sorry,
we
Tom.
have item 190.
Tom,
Yes,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Nina, did you vote? She's got a question whether you voted.
Yes,
or
I
not.
did.
She did.
Yes.
So it's,
Sorry, I just sort of half raised my hand.
okay, sorry. 190-701 Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, Richardson and Associates authorized agents. It's a site plan review for the approval of a nature park and preserve with new trails and welcome hut on Mills Road. It's over close to Bedford. So please identify yourself and proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and to the public. My name is Bob Massengale. I'm a landscape architect and project manager for Richardson Associates in Saco, Maine. I'm here tonight to represent the Conservation Trust and the Executive Committee for the Meadowwoods Preserve project that we'll hope to give an overview of today. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit first about some of the vision and the goals that are influencing this project, some of the expertise that we've wrapped into our thinking here, and then get in briefly in terms of the context, some of the character of the site, and then we'll get into an overview of what the site plan is that we're submitting today. So I just wanted to be sure, for the record, everybody has an understanding of what we're talking about here. So without further ado, I think a lot of Kennebunkport is familiar with the Conservation Trust and its goals. We're ensuring that the vision of creating a community connection into what we see as the cultural heritage of Kennebunkport and some of the natural heritage will be, and we hope to do that with this 48.5 acre parcel. So it will be a space that will create opportunities for humans, animals, and the land to kind of coexist in a safe and beneficial way, educational way. And we're seeing this as a way that might take some stress off of some of the other open spaces in the community for the future use. So with that, we've had, for our executive committee, a lot of expertise from the fields of conservation biology, natural resource management, animal health, and welfare. That's been informing some of the program for the site, as well as outdoor educators. And then we've worked with a team of professionals that have included Frick, environmental scientists, Walsh Engineering, and we've had a really good relationship with DEP. So we're kind of examining things like sensitive habitat and marshlands, which we're not going to have direct impacts on with this project, and sort of establishing what the principles are for the site to come. So with that kind of brief overview, I'd just like to share a little bit of where we are in the neighborhood. So again, with what we're calling the Meadowwoods Preserve, it's about a 48.5 acre parcel here that's shown in orange, or if you need to refer to the screen to your right. This parcel is a land that has a kind of a direct connection to what's already a conservation accumulation of property that's about 400 to 500 acres. So in terms of the context, 48.5 ties into a larger 400 to 500 acre potential in the future for some kind of a light, kind of a trail informer network, but that's not part of the project today. But we see this in its own right as a destination area, and we're primarily keeping most of what the program will be in this dashed area here in the center part of the parcel. To that end, about the first 500 feet of the parcel are in the Goose Rocks Beach Zone area, and the remainder upper portion of the parcel is in the Free Enterprise Zone. So what we're proposing and why we need a planning board review tonight is we have a community building that would be used for small gathering purposes. It's about an 800 square foot, what we're calling a welcome hut, that if future build out would not grow to more than about 1,100 square feet, as I indicated in our cover letter. That would kind of be the heart of the park. We would then tie into some subsequent trails that I'll discuss a little bit further today. So that's why we're here. I wanted to give everybody a quick overview in terms of the context. So again, we have connections to other conservation property. We're here just west of Oak Ridge Road and just to the north of Mills Road. We have an existing gravel road into the site that we'll continue to use and that we've spoken with Chief Everett about. And in this corner of the property used to be the old Cloverleaf Dairy, and after that, the Bryant family subsequently gained ownership of the property, and it's been used for kind of simple material storage, things like wood chips or some timber storage, and then prior to that was a little bit of sand and gravel excavation that was occurring, as you can see here from this 2003 satellite image. So the blue areas were excavation zones where that sand and gravel was extracted. Some of our programming was influenced by knowing that these areas could hold water, so we thought with DEP input and with assistance from Frick and some of our committee, we thought it could be a good opportunity for the public to enjoy wildlife viewing for a small pond. And then portions of the other area would be going back into pollinator prairie and some upland meadows with some wet meadow areas here too. So as you can see from 2003, almost 20 years ago, a little bit of how this was a working area. 2018, the satellite kind of shows how it was beginning to be put back to sleep and still cleared. A lot of things like dump trucks or some utility vehicles would kind of come through what is this gravel road here on the lower portion. We've worked with the Bryants to have a clear understanding in terms of the deed and some of the transference of the land sale, that they would still have easement rights into this portion of the property where they still use it for some mulch storage or things of that nature. So that we would have gated access, but they would have a key to kind of maintain entry to the site. Other portions, what we're calling the quarry pool remains. We seek to incorporate that into kind of a dry fire hydrant for emergency service needs that might, refer to the HUD if we need it. And this is kind of the one aspect of some of the worked areas that have been cleared and already disturbed. This is kind of an example of the character of those areas. So if you see here, what is kind of looking into that portion of the Bryant land where some of the mulch areas are stored. You have a little bit of that road clearing and then some of the timber that's been accumulated just while we're cleaning up the property for the transference. So this is the type of area where, we were inspired by what we saw as a chance for an opportunity for people who use the space. So with this kind of use on the site, there are a lot of roads that have been, created to kind of move into certain areas that we would use for opportunities to make trails, so we're not having to do disturbance where we don't have to. We have an area that's already been cleared and thinned of timber that we would have an enclosure space. And then some of the areas that have been rutted from off-road vehicle use, we prohibit kind of random vehicles coming through the property, and we repair stuff that's been rutted. So that's just to kind of give a flavor of where we see opportunities for the worked areas. And then when we're coming into some of the inspirational quality of the site, we were really excited to find evidence of a lot of what we're calling these grove, wet meadow, kind of maple groves that exist. So if you think about the northwest corner of the site, this is an area where that's currently existing, and we would not have any kind of direct impacts to these types of spaces. Other elements, and I'll refer quickly to the larger satellite photo here. So again, that maple grove is back here in this corner. This other open space here is what is kind of a sunny open meadow that has some sweet fern, a little bit of cranberries. It's not a wetland of significance working with DEP and Frick, but it's still a nice area that we would not have an impact in. But it's the kind of feature that we're inspired to kind of reintroduce to some of the areas that they've cleared. Within that, we have Beaver Pond Brook that's coming through the property. We've got a property that's characterized by kind of pit and mound topography, so the rock ledges, white pine, spruce, hemlock, forests of that kind of nature. And these are all things that we're responding to with our site design. So again, this dashed area is where we're proposing to do the most of our program. And as you can see here, sort of with the site plan, from this zone, where we've done the enlargement for where a lot of where the action is kind of happening for the site. Excuse me. And so again, just to kind of compare with the natural inspiration versus some of the cleared and impact areas. We have here where the small pond that we're proposing would take place. So again, that's just to the left where the wood pile is in that photo. We have about a half mile of what we're envisioning as a fully accessible trail system. So people of all ages, all movement abilities would be able to use this trail. There would be signage and probably a KCT staff member or somebody that would help with the programming of the site, so we would ensure there would be no bicycle uses or kind of conflicting uses. No kind of dog walking would happen on the ADA trail, so people could be assured of a consistent experience. This would tie into that small welcome hut that we were describing, something that's on axis with the existing gravel road that you could see would be a kind of a welcoming space for a small group to gather. We'd have a couple of parking areas, one that would be about 9 to 10 cars, including 2 ADA spaces, and a lower one for what would be in that cleared area of the woods, where we're envisioning this to be an enclosed, fenced-in, and managed off-leash dog area. There would be waste facilities for cleanup, garbage receptacles, and then we would have a double-gated entry at near the parking and at the lower portion of the site for people who are walking on site. Other things would be, we're excited about a peripheral trail system that would be multi-use and sort of multi-seasonal, so winter sports, bicycles and hiking could happen on these trails that would not mix in with the ADA trail loop. And then in terms of other features, we're trying to reuse the existing road in its current condition. It's about 12 to 16 feet wide. In places that we might need to thin a tree for emergency access, we've already worked with Chief Everett to get his letter of support. We're going to introduce at least 3 about 55-foot long by 10-foot deep pull-out areas. So you could have both an emergency vehicle and sort of a civilian vehicle pull off if needed, which would happen here to ensure safe traffic flow. And with the gate access, the fire department, KCT, and the Bryant family would have a key to come in, and we'd ensure a 60 by 30-foot hammerhead turnaround for emergency vehicles, with the dry hydrant being about 250 feet from the cabin. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we're proposing. We've been working with Walsh engineers just in terms of getting some of the preliminaries together for how we would address stormwater on the site. Essentially, if we have over 10,000 square feet of disturbance, we're required by ordinance to have a protection plan for how we would deal with like the 50-year flood if that's an event that would come up. And so we've identified strategies where we would take care of and address those types of concerns on the property. So these would be biofiltrations, which would be like rain gardens or constructed wetlands, occurring here by the fire pullout, here by the cabin and the parking area, and then the enclosed dog space would have 2 distinct and unique water purity systems. So we would do a sand filter strategy in conjunction with vegetated buffers, and we would also have a 3rd unit that would be some of the constructed wetland strategies that would kind of pick up these areas in red that are sort of specific micro districts for how the drainage works. So we're taking a lot of awareness about trying to reduce any of the imperviousness of the site, and if anything, we're trying to make sure any area is kind of contained and well thought of. Additionally, the trust has a plan to, at the north end of the site where Beaver Pond Brook comes in, we will be taking water sampling to do a kind of a pre and a post water condition, and we'll be taking down lower at where the creek leaves, so we know if there are any impacts, we can make programming change and kind of handle that immediately. And I'm going to drop off here and quickly let Bill Walsh take over if he has a couple of additional things for some of the constructed wetland diagrams that we're talking about, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Thanks, Bob. Bill Walsh from Walsh Engineering. I think Bob hit a lot of the items that we have thought through and discussed with our. Let's see, we'll do something here.
Here, Bill, one second.
So back to the plan that Bob had as far as stormwater goes. We're looking at several different stormwater features out here. One of them is a new pond that will be excavated in this area. That pond's going to help to collect stormwater in this area. It will have probably a new outlet, or it will have an outlet on it rather, that will direct our flow down through the stream that runs down this way and eventually ends up down in the brook down here. The idea, as Bob said, is to try to break this up into the smaller watersheds that we have. We know water quality is an issue in this area. We know that this watershed has some E. coli issues, so we're trying to address that up front. What we have talked about and what we plan to do is to use a couple of different methods in the watersheds, in the sub-watersheds, to deal with these, and some of them will be what we call biofiltration or a rain garden. I'm sure you guys have heard this term before. The idea being that they're sort of depressions that are planted. They allow some infiltration into the ground. They also allow for some detention in those spaces. So we will control quality and quantity through those, so they'll be sized accordingly with appropriate vegetation in them to do it. The other one, I think that's a little more challenging is the E. coli issue and how we deal with that and making sure that we address that properly. As Bob said, our intention is to take some background samples. So let's figure out what we have in the area right now, in the stream up above and down below of the site. So we'll understand what our existing E. coli issues are or are not. What we've done is, or what we're planning is some gravel wetlands that will be used primarily on the dog park area. So there are several things that need to be done in the dog park area. One is posting signs and educating people that they have to pick up after themselves. Secondly, having the waste disposal system there so that people can do that relatively easily. Third, I think something along this lines, which is it's essentially a built gravel wetland. Water comes into this end of it. It actually flows sort of underground here. Plants are allowed to uptake the water and nutrients that are in it before it discharges out the other side. So it is an actual constructed wetland, but the information that we've been able to track down on this is that these are probably the most effective ways to deal with E. coli that we can come up with. Again, I think this is going to be sort of a multi-pronged approach, making sure that people pick up after their dogs, pick up the waste, but then be able to use these to treat. And then finally, when we discharge out of this, we'll be going through a wooded buffer before we discharge off-site. Again, it's sort of a comprehensive approach. I think in the different sub-watersheds, there'll be different ways in doing it, but we feel pretty confident we can tackle those issues up front. So with that, I think Bob and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Bill, do you know what the source of the E. coli issues are that you're dealing with? How do you know about them and, you know,
It's pretty well documented.
any other context?
It's pretty well, it's part of that Goose Rocks Beach, the E. coli issue. Werner, you probably know as much about it as anybody.
Yeah, so, you know, hopefully as folks know, during the summertime, you know, the town actively participates with the Maine Healthy Beaches program. And as part of that participation, you know, we regularly do water quality samples at Goose Rocks Beach. And so, you know, what we've certainly seen is that, you know, when we don't have storm events, the water quality, bacteria numbers are low, you know. But, you know, what we tend to see is after significant rain events, the bacteria levels increase. And so we've been, you know, consistently testing, you know, the Goose Rocks Beach area in that immediate watershed, say pretty actively since 2006, without necessarily any clear indicator about what drives the bacteria.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've been, you know, this year, last year and this year, I mean, we've been certainly more proactive in, you know, doing some DNA testing and, you know, some other different kind of alternatives. And I think the simple answer is there's no smoking gun, you know, for this. You know, there's a lot of different theories and a lot of, you know, evidence that would point you all over the place, you know, as far as what the source may be. So when this project came forward for discussion, just being sensitive to the fact that we're dealing with water quality issues at Goose Rocks and knowing and understanding how the topography works in that area and knowing that this area eventually makes its way down to the beach, you know, I made it a point to, you know, to the Conservation Trust and their team that water quality is important and that we want to make sure that we're not, you know, that we're being smart about what occurs on this site and that we're not knowingly introducing or creating any additional issues.
So it was not a suspicion that this site may be the source of the E. coli?
No.
Okay.
But
No,
it
no,
does seem
in my
like
opinion,
if-
they're being proactive,
enough.
in not wanting to contribute to a nebulous issue that we haven't,
Exactly.
really tracked down.
it seems like there might be an opportunity for a before and after and a continued monitoring, a learning
Absolutely.
from this, right? If you're going to go to all of this
Absolutely. I
issue,
think that's
somebody should be publishing.
Exactly. I think that's part of the key of tackling the water quality samples up front. Let's figure out what our background data is, what we have coming onto
I
the site
see.
and off of the site. So it's certainly something that we want to be aware of.
I asked in part because I'm intrigued by the idea that you're going to be forming a pond and there's an existing quarry and, you start to worry about the safety issues involved there and how does the E. coli tie into that or does it in your mind?
I don't, honestly, I guess we're not quite sure, and that's part of the background testing. I don't think that, where we're forming the pond, it's not part of the stream system, if you will. This is gonna be a dug pond.
It's not a swimming hole, it's a wildlife, but though would use it in birds
Yes,
and, the like. and,
absolutely.
yeah,
Correct,
okay.
yeah. We would, without going in over detail, but correct, the intent would be for, wildlife viewing, small, nature education kind of small groups. We're ensuring to kind of give a variety of shoreline conditions, so it's not just a simple ellipse of an area, so it would have high wildlife value. And then in that, there would be natural edges where people would not have access to, so.
It's not part of the dog park, though.
No, not at all. Mm-mm.
Okay, thank you.
We've got a system for disposal at the dog park. Are there going to be human restrooms?
We're anticipating having an accessible bathroom that would be in the hut. So with that, I think we've been anticipating having both an indoor and outdoor access to that. We've had some work previously to do some test pit kind of exploration for any suitability for a septic type of a system.
Okay.
And then also the location of the hut would be close enough to the parking where if we needed to, I think we could do like a pump truck or something, but we'd like to have it kind of more of a self-contained system, right?
In your pond,
Yes. Thanks.
are you going to monitor it for oxygen content? Do you expect to have an aeration system? Or do you expect it to be possibly go stagnant where it's giving off CO2? Are you going to be looking at that?
Bill, did you want to?
Yep.
Yeah, this is something that Walsh is going to be kind of taking the lead on some of the pond detailing.
Yeah, we've talked about that at length. One of the biggest issues with ponds, sounds like you probably know, is
Well, there's no turnover in a small
exactly,
pond.
exactly. And what we've talked about was the idea of actually drilling some wells out here and possibly feeding the pond that way also. That's been my experience with ponds. If they don't have an inflow, they don't have enough water coming into them, then you can run into that issue or that problem. So.
Well, you don't have to have water running into them. You could just have some sort of aeration system
You could.
and just monitor the oxygen levels.
Yeah, generally, I find it's sort of the combination of the two that works best. I've had them go, the water system that we had going into ponds not being turned on, and when that happened, they'd bloom. And so,
And your wetland purification area, basically, is that going to be underwater plants, algae, marginal plants?
there'll be, there will be wetland plants, and I'll try to explain this a little bit. The outlet of the pond would be through the wetland would be through a structure right here. And what it does is it maintains the water level right there, just at the base of the soil. So essentially, it acts sort of like a natural forested wetland that we would have in this area. So scrub shrub probably in this area, and the roots can stay wet and will stay wet. So water comes in, moves down through the gravel wetland, down through here, but yet is taken up here. And the water doesn't discharge until it reaches that point.
So it's going to be mostly plants?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep,
green
yep.
plants.
This is actually modeled, UNH has done quite a few studies on these, and that's what it's modeled after. And we found that, based on the data that we found, about 75% removal of E. coli through 75 to 80% through a wetland system.
The rain gardens, are those using existing excavations or are these new excavations?
They'd probably be new ones. We're gonna need to form them in the right place to pick up the water.
Do you anticipate having to do mosquito control for the new water?
We've discussed that for, at least at a preliminary level. I think that needs a little bit further study, but in terms of things like, ticks or things that are coming with the trails, that's why we're trying to keep like the ADA path kind of a minimum width of about 6 feet. So you're not getting a lot of direct brushing that's happening for people walking through. But in terms of mosquitoes, we're definitely, it's a wet area.
But you're introducing a new still water area.
Well, with the pond, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It's part of the component, but I think in terms of strategies with, aeration and having, certain types of wildlife that are in there, I think those are means that, in terms of fish or things that might eat larvae, that's a means that we would be considering for kind of helping to try to manage that. And then I think in terms of the quality of the experience, we're thinking about screened porches and so forth that for the hut. So at least people have a little bit of an escape room if things from the non-introduced areas of the wetlands are kind of buzzing around.
I have a couple of questions for you. One, why a dog park? I mean, they've already taken over the beaches.
Sure.
So,
Absolutely. I think that's a great comment. And the reason why is what we seek to do, with part of our thinking for the site and the hut would be having a staffer or somebody who's affiliated with the KCT or a volunteer basis that would really help with kind of program management for this dog area. And so, we see this as an opportunity where we have a little bit of resources. We've done some thinking and got a lot of work and support from a lot of experts in these areas on creating a managed experience that people would learn kind of protocols and etiquette. We're thinking about this as kind of a trial size zone. So it's something we can see, what works and by having a close eye on it. And we're seeking to kind of create an environment where people would kind of come away from maybe trails or areas in Kennebunkport that they haven't had kind of that good influence or modeling or some of the resource support that they might be lacking. And so we would have people there that would kind of help police some of the use of that area or any of the trails around it. So we see it as, just like you're saying, either the beach or places around town that things have been a real kind of a pinch point. We think this is an opportunity to kind of create a constructed conversation through the space where we can do either programs or, just give people a little bit of a destination to go to where we can kind of help diffuse conflicts. So that was a little bit of a long answer, but that's sort of the thinking we put into that.
no, understood. How big is the pollinator meadow going to be? What kind of area?
Sure. So when we're speaking about meadows, right now we've got about I would say about 20,000 direct kind of square feet as a contained area that would be in this upland. So again, there's an area that's similar, not quite as muddy, but a little bit up that's in this condition. And that would have more of what we're calling that pollinator prairie. So it's an area for different insects and birds and things like that would be probably lightly mowed and managed maybe once a year or something like that. But an area, that's what we're speaking about when we talk about that. And when we talk about like a wet meadow opportunity, it would be in kind of the lower areas near the pond. So we're working with not any abrupt or sheer deep drop-off edges for the pond, but sort of gradual areas where wet plants and that habitat could occur. And it's just another kind of an ecotone or edge that creates a learning opportunity and place for enjoyment.
Is your hut going to have windows?
The hut going to have windows? I believe we're anticipating windows, yes, but that
they
hasn't been fully.
Are they going to be bird-friendly windows?
I think that's a great question, and I think clearly as the trust, a conservation trust, we would consider that for sure, and I think screened porches will really help kind of create at least a softer barrier. And I think also in terms of the types of trees and things that you're putting near houses, if you sometimes do like small shrubs or something like a serviceberry, you're giving birds a place to land before impact, so they're not kind of coming in at full speed into a window situation.
That doesn't necessarily follow, because what birds really see is they see a reflection of the trees, and it looks to them like open space that they can fly through, and that's where they kill themselves.
Absolutely. I'm just speaking of wildlife management courses that I've had on that specific issue, and I'm sure there's room for adjustment if we need to do that. So,
Well, there's bird-friendly glass out there.
yeah.
There are systems that are even less expensive where you just set up some rope lines, paracord lines and so forth. Will keep them out, and you still get a view. There are dots you can put on the window, UV dots, that help a lot with some of them. It won't affect the aggression of the male birds when they see their reflection, but
I've been hearing this cardinal out my window, like
Right.
waking me up at 4 the past few days.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think all those would be great solutions that could be
well, I
easily
think if
implemented.
you're going to have conservation land, you've got to think about that.
Absolutely.
The other thing I'm concerned about is lighting. Is there going to be lighting at night?
That's a great question. We're anticipating this being like all other conservation properties. So for the public, it's essentially dusk to dawn, or dawn to dusk, excuse me, kind of usage. This is not a vampire camp. I just want to make that clear. But we would have a lower gate down by Mills Road that would be, again, that Knox box keyed system. So KCT would have a key, the fire department would have a key, and the Bryants would have a key, but it would be restricted access after hours, we're envisioning. And then if we were to need lighting, as we've kind of called out in some of the detailed enlargements, we'd be sure that any lighting for area lighting would be less than 1,800 lumens, and that any kind of direct spot lighting that might be associated with the building would be about 900 lumens or less. So I've included some fixtures specifically that meet those requirements, and we're talking about post fixtures that would not be greater than about 15 feet in height. So if we do them, they would be very strategic around either a gate or at a parking area, and we would be sure that they would be full cutoff, dark sky friendly, and not something that would be a problem for people, kind of neighbors or people coming in.
Well, it's more than them folks focusing upward. We're losing lightning bugs at a great rate, and it's been, I don't know whether it's been shown, but it's been suggested that lighting is affecting them seriously, and the population is really decimated. And if that population is decimated, then there are a lot of other insect populations that are probably decimated along with it. So keeping lighting at a minimum, no matter where it's shining, is really important, I think, for conservation area.
Absolutely agree.
I wasn't sure where all your dry hydrants were. I was trying to read what the fire marshal said, and can you point out exactly where they all are?
Absolutely. We're proposing one that's near the hut, and that would be right here on the edge of the existing quarry pond. So it's within 250 feet of the hut, and then it's the pond situation is one where it's according to the Bryants, it's a gravelly bottom, and it's one that's about what we've kind of rough estimated with a line about 8 feet deep or so. So, speaking with Chief Everett, we feel that this would be a good support, and it could have a connection with the new pond as well if we needed additional water. In terms of the quarry pond could. And one thing I forgot to mention, with this existing road and access trail, we would have space for an emergency, sort of a 4x4 or light vehicle that could get back along a trail system that was already an old road. And so if somebody were to sprain an ankle or there was an issue, we'd be able to access deeper into the property and get somebody out quickly.
It was suggested, I think, somewhere in the application that you were thinking in the future of connecting to the KCT land that's adjacent to it.
To the north?
Yeah.
That's, we haven't had that in scope, but I think if there's an opportunity, I think in terms of like a light, kind of a primitive trail that's, respectful of the conditions like we've been trying to do here, that might happen. And if it would, we've identified an appropriate crossing point with the Department of Environmental Protection where we would not have impacts to marshland, and we would have the shortest kind of span possible over the Beaver Brook. So Beaver Pond Brook, excuse me. So if it happens, we've got a plan that we've been talking with DEP, and Frick has helped us with that.
You started to mention, you outlined the parking by the welcome hut. You started to mention by the dog area. Could you just point to where, I think that was about 5 cars?
Yes, it's right here, and just if you need an enlargement, it's this area here.
Okay. And you also mentioned additional trail systems, non-ADA?
Correct.
Kind of-
Yeah, so those would be, pardon my flopping around here, but
Right.
out on the perimeter edge here and down, and then around here on what the remainder of the access road would be.
So not deeper into the property?
It would potentially connect if we needed to make that inroad. So
But
those
that's
would
not
be
the current
routes-
plan.
Those would be the routes we would take, and we've identified that they would stay out of wetlands and so forth. Yep, yep.
And what do you anticipate for a surface, just the existing dirt surface?
We would use, for the ADA trail, it would be a stone dust path
Right,
on
but-
kind of a compacted
but the other
subgrade.
outlying
And
trails?
this would be probably a simple, like a mulch trail, or just a kind of a low impact, minimal clearing,
Okay.
similar to other conservation trails that are there. Yep.
Okay, anyone else?
So, can we just go back on the E. coli for a minute? So when I hear E. coli, that's an indicator of bacterial contamination. So it's not just, I mean, so there's a possibility it's not just E. coli. It's just an easy one to figure out. So, and when I hear bacteria, what I think of is buildup of bacterial slimes on surfaces, like in your through flow device.
Yep.
So, and of course, slimes mean you're gonna have to clean it out every now and then. So are you gonna have some mechanism to clean this out or replace it every so often? If it plugging, it seems to me plugging of your flow-through channels could occur.
Yeah,
Yep, right through there.
yeah. When water comes in, there's a forebay, a sediment forebay on this side of it. It comes through and then flows through through a sort of a stone berm, and then drops down in through stone and into stone. So this is really just it's kind of a stone, underground stone blanket that exists under here. These will be checked sort of regularly on the surface to see where things are. Generally, we're doing at least once a year inspections on our stormwater stuff. So we have a maintenance plan that will say, we're out here, we checked it, we looked at it. If there's an issue, then we'll deal with it, is generally how we go about it.
So if it plugs, you'll do remediation at the time?
Yeah.
Dig it out and replace it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the chances of this system, I think, plugging in that as a natural system I think are pretty slim. Plugging could, or generally what you have is sort of at the sediment forebay. If you've got material coming in there, that needs to be cleaned out every once in a while. This generally becomes just sort of a natural wetland to function that way. So obviously it will be inspected, but I don't anticipate much of any real work to be done on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Werner, this is, on the application, it says it's neither RP nor shoreline. Entirely correct? Super.
Yeah, even though you
Things
have,
in the lease
you
there.
have wetlands, associated with it, none of those are shown on the shoreline zoning map.
Okay, cool.
As far as setbacks go, Tom, just to clarify, we're honoring, and adhering to the 75-foot setbacks from any kind of blue line stream. And then for any kind of wetlands of significance or things that are on property, we're addressing those types of boundary respects in terms of impacts and stuff.
Good. Okay, anyone else from the board?
Yeah, I still have a few questions.
Sure. Go.
I always like to make sure I understand what the board's role is in this, and I think you alluded to it up front, that there's a community building, which is a conditional use in the Goose Rocks zone, which is where the building's going to be located, right?
The building will be in the free enterprise zone, but you're correct.
Is it also a conditional use in the free enterprise?
so
My
what you-
understanding is it is.
So what you have is park is listed as a conditional use,
Both in
in the
both
zone.
zones? Yeah,
and hence that's why it's in front of the planning board.
okay. So we're going to look at it from that point of view.
Okay.
You called it in your note a gateway park. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
When I'm speaking about, when I use the word or the term gateway, it's kind of a, if you look at kind of the larger scale context of that portion of Kennebunkport, so I mean, we're talking acres and acres, and we think about the conservation lands that are about the 400 to 500 acre amount just north and abutting. This, as a destination space, kind of becomes like a threshold or like your front door into the rest of the house type of a thing. So in terms of a gateway, we see this as if there was a future sort of a light trail network, people would be coming through Meadow Woods into an additional 400 to 500 acres. Yeah.
You're saying it could potentially be a gateway park, but this is not a gateway park as it is currently proposed.
Not yet, unless you're thinking of a gateway into learning about nature or seeing some of these wetlands. So,
That's why I was asking.
But
Yeah.
that's, yeah, so
Okay.
that, if that clarifies, I hope it does. Sorry to get poetic.
No, that's fine. I've underlined the word "might"
Okay.
in your second paragraph here. This property might relate to in the future.
Correct.
And,
Correct.
So we'll keep our eye on the prize here. We're really talking about any issues there might be with creating a park and a community building on this land in its current location.
I would add or clarify park, and I think
Please.
really preserve is a lot, you know, because if you think about where we're impacting with the program, probably about in the neighborhood of about 3.5 or 4 acres, and of that, that's on about 3 acres of what we've sort of shared that's kind of cleared or disturbed site.
Yep.
So you're right, some parts of park, but also some parts of the preserve.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get into coloring the description of what we mean by a park. I
Sure.
don't mean an amusement park, but from the purposes of the land use ordinance, I think a preserve is a type of park, and that is an important distinction to
Absolutely.
make. That it. So in getting into that, and that seeing as a community resource, I'm familiar with the Kennebunkport Land Trust property up on Gravelly Brook Road, and my wife and I enjoy using that in the winter, in the summer. What's your vision for the use by the community of this park, where it's going to be gated? Can you tell me how that's going to work? Is this a seasonal thing? Is it a once in a while we're going to open it? Is there a commitment to it being open every day? I've got this habit now, I'm bringing my dog there every day, and it's going to be there for me. Or is it closed on Christmas? Is it what's going on there?
Well, I'm happy to refer to people in the executive committee who've been
Okay.
discussing that
So-
if we need to,
so
but we were thinking in terms of more informal for small groups use, open during, you know, dusk to dawn hours would typically kind of be within that keeping, and then if it was sort of small organized groups for a learning program or something like that.
So is it going to be, is the dog park, for example,
Yeah.
portion of it, going to be open to the public routinely?
It would have restricted access. So in terms of, if that's part of the programming aspect, so we would have, we're considering a system where you would need to go through a process of getting registered, and then you would have an area like a key or some kind of a way to get through into the gate. So it would be open to the public, but they have to go through kind of a process to ensure that things like you know, other issues are on board, and they're on board with how to use the space, and then that would work.
So you would see it being used by people who were registered at times when it wasn't staffed by a Kennebunkport land trust person. They would let themselves in and use it and then leave.
That's still being refined, but I think that's essentially what we've been envisioning is having a staff member present for use in the beginning of it.
I understand, but that didn't
But
seem
over
consistent
time,
with
it
what you
probably-
just told me.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. It's
That's okay.
something
No,
that's still
that's fine.
being
I
worked
got it.
out, and we're happy to provide more information.
And I'm hammering on this a bit, I understand, because as we go look at conditional uses, we're required to say, you know, what is going to be the effect on the butters? What is it, what's it going to do to the existing environment and all? And I think how it's used is as much important here as exactly what it is. And so that process part of it that is, I understand, has got to mature over time and
Yeah.
evolve. is important for us to talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, we've located it in a manner that it's at least 600 to 700 feet away from the nearest neighbors. We're seeking to kind of utilize berms and vegetation screening, so we're creating kind of barriers for any kind of sound and things of that
I think
nature.
that's great.
Okay,
Let me give you a
yeah.
hypothetical. And
Sure.
you're going to say, no, this won't happen, but, so I'm familiar with dog parks in larger cities, right? And they're very, very important, and people always gripe that we don't have enough of them.
Yeah.
Right? I assume dogs are going to be able to be let off leash there?
In the enclosure, yes.
In the enclosure, right?
Yeah,
And so, wow, that's a really great place for me to bring my dogs. I don't have them, but this is what people are going to say.
Sure.
And now I've got safety issues, and I've got traffic issues. Gosh, there's only 5 parking spaces. If the word gets out on this, I'm going to have people coming from Biddeford, and they're going to come and use it, and, oh, no, wait a minute. It's only going to be when someone's staffing it. Or is it? Or is it, how is it going to be used? To me, is an important part of this discussion. Okay, that's what I'm pushing on. I appreciate, you sharing.
Thanks for clarifying.
where
I'll
we
stop
are.
sharing too much.
Yeah, that's fine. A few more questions?
And
You got
we're
something?
happy to bring that forward to you, in the future if that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just sort of recalling what the things are we have to go tick as we go down and say this is an allowed conditional use because we've thought these things through. And I think those are the type of things we're going to be thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about the existing quarry pond, and then you've got 2 other ponds that are mentioned, a future pond and a lower proposed pond. What are those?
The future pond is the only pond we're introducing, which is off to the lower right of the corner. There's a vernal pool that exists on the site, and that's...
Let me just read it.
Sure, please.
Picnic areas are, I'm probably reading it wrong. Picnic areas are envisioned on a small knoll overlooking the future pond, and a small pavilion will provide shade and possible outdoor classroom link between the upland pollinator meadow and lower proposed pond.
It's the same pond it's referring to.
Okay,
So the
thank you.
pavilion is here, and the picnic area is here. And this
Got
is
it.
the pond we're proposing.
Yep. Okay. Couple of more questions.
Sure.
Sorry. What type of development timeline do you see for this?
So with a nonprofit and
Right.
being primarily supported with donations and funds and grants,
Yeah.
our strategy is to try to get all of our ideas in hand to what we seek to do. So
Yeah.
if we do get an opportunity, we can begin the process to build when it's necessary.
Right, so a phased development.
It would be phased development, yes. Yep.
And what would you see first? Would the building come first? Would the dog park come first? Would the gate come first, perhaps?
I think it's something that we're still discussing in terms of the exact order, but I think the things that we've been identifying would be things like the gate. We have a grant that we're working with that we've been shortlisted for finalists for some of the pond and wetland meadow restoration.
Got it.
And I think those would be 2 of the first elements. And I think there's also interest, but it depends on fundraising for the enclosure space.
I asked, but I'm not sure I understood the answer. Do you see this as a year-round facility?
We've discussed it, yes, as a year-round facility. Yep.
Could you envision it being used for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing?
Absolutely, yep. Especially on the multi-use perimeter trails, yep.
So maybe you envision that being open to someone who didn't have the keys to the gate?
I think we're not going to put up a fence around the entire property, so I think
But you
That
are
might
going to put a
happen.
fence around the parking?
around the parking,
Yeah.
we're going to put
Well, you're going
fence
to put a
around the
gate,
dog
you're going to
area.
put a gate around the parking?
Yeah, we would have a gate in terms of at the road point, and then the other gate interior, but there would not be a perimeter fencing or things of that nature there. So while we would,
Right now, I can snowshoe and cross-country ski up
Yeah.
in Gravelly Brook. It's
Right.
awesome, even before it's plowed.
Sure.
I mean, a little bit.
I think that type of experience would, is in keeping with what we've done in the past
Yeah.
and would likely go forward. And I think the main thing is just with the gate, it's respecting some of the Bryant's agreement to, just in terms of some of the vehicular access.
Right, if you're precluded from doing it here,
Yeah,
it'd be good for us to know that.
right, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and I'm sorry. So we would have some pedestrian accesses further down, but in terms of vehicular parking off hours, the gate would be barred to that.
And in the winter,
In the winter, it'd be the same situation, yeah.
you would have it plowed? Maybe.
We would have it plowed, the road, yes, yep.
Well, how are you going to keep people from
Thank you.
parking on the road?
Yeah.
We'd have a short turnaround, kind of in, and as far as, parking on the road, I think that's a question that we can come forward with a better answer if you.
No, I think you mean outside the gate.
Outside of the
gate?
property,
Yeah,
yeah,
In the winter, for example?
In front of the gate?
right.
I mean, how are you going to keep people from parking there and just taking out their snowshoes or their cross-country skis?
Sure, I mean, I think that's a question for similar areas, and and I think Russ might be able to answer, he's on the executive committee.
Russ Grady, Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. So this property is going to be a lot like many of our others. The gate, so we speak of a few different gates. The one and the most important one is the one that prevents vehicular traffic from going into the Bryant property at the very far end, right here. It's the one that is in front of a hammerhead for a fire department to turn around and to tap a hydrant should there be an emergency. The one towards the Mills Road side, there's one there today. It's kind of swung open and hanging to the right. Our thought is to have something there as well. Our intention is not to shut that gate. We have a number of different pull-offs along the way and parking. In fact, in many of these areas, there's more parking than we have in Tyler Brook, off of Guinea Road, in other areas. This being a private road and coming in, quite a bit from Mills Road, we'll plow it. We own the road, and the Bryants have an easement over it. They have a right of way, so we'll work with them to do that, and we've done so this past winter as we've owned it. In each one of these spots will be plowed and kept clear, just like the lower lots kept clear. So if you want to come snowshoe, you're welcome to do so. Cross-country ski, you're welcome to do so. In biking. The gate here, we talked with the Bryant family, and they wanted something there to prevent people from going in and turning around where they do a lot of their work, and we respect that, and we absolutely want to. But otherwise, access down this private road to these pull-offs and parking spaces will be a lot like pulling off of Gravelly Brook Road to the lower lot today. Certainly not a parking lot as big, but as it is today, opportunities to park here, opportunities to park there, and in dawn to dusk operation. Today we have the police department patrols a lot of our properties, and I hear it, they call in multiple times per day. We'll ask them to do the same thing here as well. So we don't anticipate, we had mentioned it's a phased approach in providing people an opportunity or another option in town instead of driving all the way to Kennebunk, to maybe come and bring your dog here in a multi-acre enclosure and feel like you're walking in the woods, but know your dog won't get away. But otherwise, the look and feel is a lot like what you might experience pulling down Tyler Brook Road and going for a shoe around Tyler Brook, or off to the Smith Preserve on Guinea Road. Dawn to dusk, people by and large respect that. And if there are ever issues, the police have been quick to take care of them, or bring them to our attention so that we can take care of that.
And this is at their turnaround on the Biddeford line.
This is in the ballpark of number 400
Okay.
Mills Road, so if you're heading towards Biddeford, it's before Bryant Lane
Yeah.
and Cloverleaf.
But it's not outside of their patrol.
No, it's entirely in town. It's entirely in
But
town.
you were saying that the gate, you do not anticipate the front gate on the road being closed?
No,
Okay.
no. I mean, we certainly could do it, but it would mean that the Bryants would stop and unlock, go through and lock, they'd come down here, stop and unlock, and go through and lock to load their gravel and do what they do. And today, you know, yes, it's just them going down the road. In the future, it might be a few other cars, but this, we don't anticipate this being something where just, you know, volumes and masses of people are going to go to. There, you might know we have over 2,000 acres of land in town already conserved. We have 19 miles of trails already there. One of the things that, you know, I walk my dogs elsewhere on different properties. Certainly I might want to go do it here, but there are plenty of options. This is just merely one more. And the question around the gateway thing, you know, this parcel was attractive to the trust because it gave us access to landlocked land. Today, as we speak, the trust owns property all the way to Oak Ridge Road. There's access from Oak Ridge. So this isn't the only place where one might want to go in and go explore. There's an option on the Oak Ridge side as well. So, you know, plenty of areas.
But in the spirit of phased development, it makes sense to do this work here.
Well, I'll be honest, this land was attractive to the trust because there was a road already in place. You know,
Yeah,
the Bryant's
yeah.
been driving over that for years. And it's a significant property, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful
Isn't
out
that
back there
beautiful?
with the cranberry bogs and the beaver pond stream. Real quick on the E. coli, and Werner mentioned it, in our creation of this preserve, we wanted to be proactive. So the beaver pond stream contributes to the beaver pond, which contributes to the Little River. We have zero evidence of anything wrong happening here, but we want to measure water as it enters this property and as it exits the property. If a problem's identified, we want to take care of it, we want to mitigate it and make sure it doesn't happen. We have no reason to believe that a problem exists today. It's just that, you know, we have a lot of folks on our committee that either live at the beach or do a lot down there, or are just interested in overall quality of the environment and water. And we think that in making that offer, we're just being good neighbors, and we're helping the town try to figure out what's going on.
You're gonna learn something.
Yeah, we could.
You don't know what.
We could learn that there's nothing wrong or that there's something going on.
That's right, that's right.
And we'd be committed to
But
taking
even
care
that
of
will
it.
be good data.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So your outer trails would be accessible to dogs, people walking dogs, not the ADA trails?
Yeah, just as any other property.
Okay.
But you know, Bob is accurate. The ADA, we don't want bikes to rut up the stone dust. We don't want someone in a bike or even with a dog to go by somebody in a walker or somebody who's elderly or mom in a carriage. You know, I mentioned we have 20 miles of trails out there. I can't think of many areas out there that somebody who's a little older or a mom in a carriage might feel comfortable going out there. We have rocks and roots. It's very natural. This is an area you know, when we had a meeting last fall, and a gentleman from UNE came to our property in a wheelchair and talked a lot about, you know, how wonderful this would be, and it kind of light bulbs went off with a few folks saying, you know, we have some neat areas and beautiful trails, but really nowhere for someone like that to go. And so we would make sure that this area was kept restricted for, you know, slow walks for handicapped moms and carriages, and eliminate issues in that area.
What are your picnic tables for, and fire pits and so forth, if it's going to be closed at dusk? Why would you have a fire pit?
So picnic areas over here, simply to overlook the trail, maybe have a snack. Over here, you know, like at the trust, we have a fire pit in the back of the building there in case anyone is snowshoeing. We do a full moon hike every now and then. When we say dawn to dusk, we don't have a sign on any of our properties saying this closes at dusk or it opens at dawn. That's typically how the properties are used. We certainly might want to do a full moon hike in the winter months when if the snow's on the ground and if the moon's high in the sky. But otherwise, it's not for, you know, people to kind of hang out and just have a fire on their own. We've had a fire pit on Gravelly Brook Road now for 10 or so years, and I can't think of one occasion where there's been somebody who's not a trust member or without a trust event having a fire there.
Any other questions? So, you feel this is a complete site plan? So, I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, in favor? Okay. In terms of a,
Yes, I will.
thank you, George. You get a lot done by smiling at people, that's really good. Anyway.
Public meeting next time?
It's kind of an evil smile.
Yes, that's the hope, is it? Anyway,
Public meeting next time?
public meeting next time, which is September, whatever, beginning of September.
First Wednesday in September.
First Wednesday in September, shortly after Labor Day.
It's like the fourth.
Fourth. Yes. All righty. So that brings us to the Henry Family Trust finding of facts.
Yeah.
Which I guess we can defer that till later with the other finding of facts.
Well, I'm not sure we're necessarily gonna read those tonight. There's probably some things we need to chat about before we.
Okay, shall
Get
we
into
chat about it?
Sure.
And then we can work on more on the findings? Because I think we do need to hash it out.
Pass that down, please.
Take one?
Yeah, thank you.
Take one, please.
Pass that.
Excuse me.
So, thank you to those who sent me some comments on this draft. Most of it was, fine. I think the history of the application is in there. The compliance with Article 5 of the land use ordinance, and then the non-compliance with one section of 5.11B15 is highlighted in there too. If you turn to page 3, at the bottom, we kind of get into the findings. And the 27A is really where, I mean, we don't even get into 10.10A very long until we have a no. So the initial draft I had comments of the denial for the modification request.
Yes.
And there was some thought that we should expand upon the reasoning for the denial. And I am open to discussion as to, and there's some suggested language in purple that is what was added. So it was a markup. This is a marked up version. If you want to take a minute to read that, that'd be great. Or to read the whole paragraph, I guess, if you want.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps for the people watching,
The key thing.
Anyone want me to read this?
you want to read that
Sure.
paragraph?
I can read the paragraph.
Yeah.
So, pursuant to the requirements of Article 10.10A of the Land Use Ordinance Guidelines for Decisions, the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings which would otherwise compel denial. A, the proposed use meets the definition or specific requirements set forth in the Land Use Ordinance and will be in compliance with applicable state or federal laws. The finding is no. Comments, Land Use Ordinance 5.11.B.15 provides that, quote, any accessory residential pier, walkway, dock, or wharf, including ramps and floats, shall be no longer than a total length of 100 feet. The planning board may, upon review, modify the length requirement if it is demonstrated that no other reasonable alternative exists to provide water access from the lot, end quote. The proposed access ramp, fixed pier, seasonal gangway, and seasonal float has an approximate length of 116 feet, and the applicant has requested a modification of the 100-foot total length requirement. After review of the applicant's second amended application and proposed alternatives, the planning board does not approve the applicant's modification request of the 100-foot total length requirement. That's where I initially stopped the paragraph. And do you want me to explain the reasoning behind it, or you want me to keep reading?
I was fine with it when I saw the first
Okay.
draft at that point, but you've added
So the reasoning,
sort of
I'll
an
explain the
expansion.
reasoning why I stopped there and then go into the second part.
Okay.
I'm not sure that the land use ordinance states that we really have to give a reason.
Agreed.
It says we may, it doesn't say that we shall if there's a modification request there. And there's really no parameters, at least in the land use ordinance, that says, well, if it meets this threshold, we need to grant the request. If it doesn't meet this threshold, it's really up to our discretion whether to grant the modification or not. So my thinking was, we could just say no, just to say no. It doesn't meet the 100-foot requirement, so no, it doesn't meet the land use ordinance, and end of discussion. There's some thought that maybe we should expand, because we did dig into this a little bit during the initial review and the public hearing as to the reasoning for the longer dock. So the thought is we should expand upon the rationale for saying no. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I brought this up because we had an application before us, before I think Neil was on the planning board, and it dealt with the lodge and the parking.
Yes.
And it was appealed
Yep.
from planning board before I was on it. And it came back to us because the judge said that there was no rationale
Yes.
for the denial. And while we do have a rationale sort of in here for the denial that the land use ordinance states that it should be, but we could give a waiver, and maybe there should be some rationale in there
Right.
about why we didn't give the waiver.
Yeah.
That's the only reason that I suggested that we
And I
might
think this,
explain in
the
there.
purple is a good rationale.
Yes.
Okay.
I like the second part of the rationale where you talk about that they do have access.
Yeah.
I have a
They
vague
do have
concern
access to the water.
on the first part of the rationale is that we're saying the reason that they chose this longer length is because it had to span a wetland. Is that then a good reason for a waiver because of that impediment?
Well,
We
If
could
there were no
go back
other
wasn't
down that
a good reason
discussion.
why.
It
if there were
would be
no other
unreasonable.
access to the water, for
Okay.
example, if there were giant ledge in front of them or
Yep.
something that was longer, yeah.
Okay.
I would offer there was another strong reason why I didn't want to give that waiver, and that was the abutters and the public's opinion was unanimous in saying that this was undesirable in the area. And it certainly, if I have discretion to grant a waiver or not, and all of the abutters are
don't
saying that this is really not in keeping with what we want, and here's all the history. I forget how many spoke, but it wasn't one or two. So if we're going to give rationale, I think I'd like to capture that thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be a little cautious with that.
Okay, please.
Only just because, you're looking at specific standards that you have in terms of rationale for site plan review denial. And so I think you have to tie it to something, specific in terms of performance related.
You're right.
Which the purple does.
Right.
Yes.
I'm just commenting on
Yeah.
the,
No,
because your waiver request was essentially for 16 feet.
Right.
Okay, so for essentially these two tables in terms of the length. And so while certainly, taking the public's opinion into play, is part of the reason why we have public hearings, is to take that into consideration. I mean, I would urge you to tie your denial specifically to, you know, sections that are addressed in the causes for site plan review denial.
Yeah, and there are some sections that do that, but we really
We
didn't
didn't
go
get into
into
the
that with
scenic part
deliberation,
and, you
which
know.
is why it's a good reason not to go any further with that.
I
So-
think the public's objection was not that it was 116 feet. I think that the public would have objected if it was 80 feet.
Right.
On the basis of I'm looking for the article, but the
Right.
one that talks about its effect on the scenic beauty and,
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's right here.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's the only reason why I,
No, your
you know,
point's
why-
very
why I
well
caution
taken.
that piece of it, because I think you're correct, George. in
I
the
looked at
sense
the,
that
the
spot on.
purple
You'd get objection
paragraph again. I
right
think
away.
that last sentence ties it together.
Yes,
So
I do
I'll read that section. The proposed location of the access ramp, fixed pier, seasonal gangway, and seasonal float are such that it must span a freshwater wetland and a shoreland marsh between the high water mark and the land, which results in the total length being over the 100-foot total length requirement pursuant to Land Use Ordinance 5.11.b.15. Currently, the applicant has water access from the lot. As a result, the applicant already has a reasonable alternative to provide water access from the lot, which results in the request to modify the 100-foot total length requirement being denied.
And the water access is the
Existing
Cove.
path.
Ebbs Cove has already just adjacent to their path down to the.
No, they
No.
have access
From
from
the
their
lot.
lot.
From the lot. They
They
can
don't-
just walk.
Just not for a
Okay, yeah, they
20-foot
can
coast.
walk
To the
from
water.
lot.
Yeah,
But they also could go
Where
around
you-
the other thing, because it's,
right.
Where you have that it has to span the freshwater wetland and the saltwater marsh, there was also the issue with the mud and having to extend out in order to get a boat into the stream.
well, the,
Right, if you wanted to have enough access to get a boat that required more clearance, then you had to go further.
Yeah.
But
So
if
it
you-
was beyond the salt marsh into the
Right.
low tide bed. I'm losing words right now.
But that's true for a lot of water access for anybody who has shoreline
Yes.
zoning. I mean.
But it was
I
those,
haven't-
those three things, not just the freshwater wetland and the saltwater, but they had to extend farther out into the stream.
so.
Can you repeat
Because
that,
if
George?
the water came
Sorry.
right up to the salt marsh, and they could have just stopped there.
Say again.
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
So it says must span a freshwater wetland and a shoreland marsh and extend into the low tide zone, whatever we're calling that mud space.
Just extend into Turbitt's Creek.
Yeah,
Is that-
extended into
Yeah.
turbine,
Yeah.
yeah.
Into the flat bottom area of
Yeah.
Right.
Turbitt's Creek.
That's right, it had to get out to the flat bottom.
They had
So
the
last
ramp and the
16
float.
feet, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you think you'll have it for us next time, then?
Well, there's one
wanna
more
read out
thing.
One more
28?
thing,
Yeah, there's
of
one more
course.
thing we need to discuss.
Oh.
28, I added, so originally when I put this together, based on our last meeting, I was under the impression that I was under the impression the board took the opinion that we need to address all of 10.10. So I originally included all of that. And then based on some comments, I was on the fence as to whether to include that or not, but the thought was we shouldn't address that because we didn't really dig into that during the discussion. So I'm not sure it's appropriate to really,
We didn't have a
Vote on
separate
that,
vote
or-
We
on each
didn't,
of
we
the
did not
findings.
do a separate vote on
Yeah.
the,
On each of the findings.
so,
findings
I think
particularly.
you're speaking to those, the remainder of the articles in your comment on 28. You're just saying, we didn't deliberate on
Right.
these, so we don't have a specific yes/no finding,
Right,
but we went far enough to say we didn't have to go any further.
agreed.
I don't,
No,
we
I-
spent 4 meetings on this.
I think I'll let Warner voice his concerns at this point.
So, you know, just looking at this kind of from a little bit of a different perspective, you know, in a sense that you've got a basis for denial on one particular section. And so my concern is that if you don't at least address the other component pieces of it, you know, the applicant, you know, is at a bit of is at a bit of a disadvantage because you haven't addressed any of the rest of the standards, as outlined here. And so arguably if the applicant comes back with a modified application, the rest of these pieces are left somewhat undetermined. So for instance, if they came back with another application that met the 100-foot length limitation that you had specifically spelled out, there's no guidance as to if there's anything else in the application that would have compelled denial.
We had this very discussion with
Right.
them at the end. They asked explicitly, if we come back with one that's under 100 feet, will you grant it? And we said, well, there's a number of other things we'd have to talk through.
So, and I just think from an appeals perspective as well, there's one specific item, that's listed here for cause for denial, and so in an appeal scenario, I would expect them to focus on that one particular instance.
Yeah.
Not necessarily all of the other component pieces that haven't been addressed, that the board didn't address in its findings.
Yeah. Well, if we were to,
So, I think you're justified with the one, it's just, I caution about not having addressed the rest of them and leaving that as an unknown.
The problem with that is we took a vote without addressing the individual findings.
Understood. And as a general practice, you all don't necessarily tend to do that on a lot of other applications until you're formally going through your findings, when you're actually reading them.
Right.
yeah, well, I think
So, I don't think you're outside of the scope of what your practice has been. This is a unique one in the sense that you have a denial.
So,
there's, there are only a couple of things that we would, in the rest of this, that might be controversial, right? There's the scenic vista one and the adverse,
well, I think our options are, we stick with paragraph 28, and we just don't address them, because we did not
Address them.
we did
Address
not
them.
deliberate with them.
during the deliberations, and, you get to paragraph A, that's a no, that compels denial.
Yeah.
And, the other option is, we go through each one right now,
Reopen deliberations.
yeah,
That's what you're suggesting, I think.
and, we comprehensively address each one of 10.10. I can go either way. I think just keeping paragraph 28, in my opinion, is the right way to go. But
Why don't we put that to the board
Yeah.
first?
that's fine.
How does the board feel about it as written?
Well, so is the usual practice then kind of like an inspector, when you have your house inspected, the first thing the inspector finds wrong, he just stops, they say, okay, fix this. And then you
Give me a
fix it, and then he
call.
comes back, yeah. So is that kind of what we're doing here? We're saying, okay, we found one thing wrong, so we're just chopping it off, and then if the applicant wants to come back, then next time, these other issues could arise. Is that what we're doing here?
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons is we went around and around. We went 3 applications trying to suggest that there needed to be a way to get under 100.
Yeah,
And the
Oh, yeah.
applicant convinced us that there was no way
yeah,
that he
Yeah.
could do that.
yeah,
There was no other option. And so that was a hard no.
yeah.
And so we stopped.
Well, the rationale is clear. I'm just saying, that, so we're going to basically expect a resubmission, and then at that point address 10.10?
But
Is that the idea?
I would be amazed if we had a resubmission, since they were absolutely convinced there was no way to get under 100.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I'm just saying.
In terms of the
Well,
in terms of the
So-
other items that are on there, it would seem that N is the only one we might deliberate on. And N on page 5 is, the proposed use will not have an adverse
Right,
effect,
right, and there's
significant scenic vistas on significant wildlife habitat.
We certainly talked about that enough, that issue enough, and I think that is what the public spoke to.
Public
mainly.
did, but I mean, is it reasonable,
Consider capturing a comment.
is it unreasonable to have a dock on a stream where other people have docks? Is that ruining the scenic vista? it's
So,
the
so,
coast of
so
Maine.
so now you're talking about whether you agreed with the public on that. All I'm
We
saying
didn't
is
deliberate
that,
about
We
it.
did not really
I'm
deliberate or
saying
take a
to
vote on the
Verna's
specific
concern,
Yeah.
that,
So-
that you don't give a fair shake to the applicant, we could at least capture the fact that the jury was still out on this one, based on the fact that we
Does that
didn't
leave it
deliberate.
open to an appeal process
I-
by having that
Maybe it makes it
vague?
worse, but I,
Yeah,
Yep.
that would be my concern too.
Yeah. Although I do think, Larry, your example is, I think, exactly just where I'm at in terms of the question, is that it is essentially the equivalent of, hi, I walk in the door and I check the water temperature and it's not the right water temperature and I turn around and walk back out, without, giving a property owner the rest of, a fair shake on, the rest of an inspection. I think that's a good example, and that's why I bring this piece, this piece of it up, because it leaves, these, the rest of these component pieces unanswered.
I guess my rebuttal to that would be, they may come back in 2 years and all of us may be gone, so it may be an entirely different board that views scenic vistas and docks differently than we
Totally.
do.
Yep.
So I would not want to setting precedent's probably not the right verbiage, but I don't want to hold a separate board's feet to the fire in a future potential application that may never, ever be submitted. I don't know.
Someone may come up with a 100-foot design.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to be honest, if they had, I probably,
We probably
Well,
would-
if they
we'd
came
be having a different
we wouldn't-
discussion.
yes.
with a completely new application, it would be up to that board to decide, no
Yeah.
matter what we decided on a previous application.
Yeah.
After 4 meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and several submissions.
So I guess that's where I was going, where I don't want to set, I see the argument for setting expectations, but I don't want to set expectations and then those expectations not be met by a future board.
Based
you
on
know?
that, I think the way you have the draft in purple right now is accurate. I think you leave N off of it.
I think it
Yeah,
captures
I
what we
think-
did.
Yes.
Well, I think it's the way to do it, yeah.
Because it
Okay.
says if you get no on any one of these, you can't do it. And they got no, so it stops there.
And
You don't need 2 no's. It
Yeah,
doesn't
don't-
make it
To
more
be
valid.
clear, a reapplication gets, a new application
Refresh.
gets looked at on its own merits.
Right.
Yeah,
with that being
exactly.
said.
Yeah.
The concern I have really is primarily more in a situation of an appeal. Not necessarily in the context of a new application. Because a new application, you come in and it gets looked at, it gets looked at fresh. Although certainly if it does come in, you've got history with this one.
Yeah.
But it's more in the context of
Well, the
of
problem
an
with an
appeal.
appeal is if the court overturned what we have done today, that it would be sent back to the board.
Then we
And
go through the other items.
Then you'd have to go through
We'd
the
have
other
to say,
items,
the
which is,
116's okay, so now,
Well,
which is
Good luck
kind
with
of
that.
hard on an applicant.
yeah.
Right.
So unanimous, everyone's okay with,
I'm okay
As
with it.
is.
I'm okay with the
Okay.
I
purple.
think
As
everyone's
is.
okay with it.
so
Yeah.
here's the rub. I'm not gonna be here next meeting, so someone will have to read this for me.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put the final version together and send it out.
So you're gonna make any changes to this? You're gonna give a clean
We could read it
copy,
tonight.
but
Clean copy.
Well, give you
Yeah,
a
I
clean,
can do a clean copy. I
clean
guess I can
copy,
sign
yeah.
it.
this, I
You
guess,
can't
is
sign
what
it.
we're-
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely
Okay,
can't sign.
good.
sorry.
All right, that's the way to do it.
All right, so Larry agrees that that's the way to do it.
Oh,
He
yeah.
gets to read it.
Oh, I get to,
No good deed goes unpunished.
okay, that's fine.
I mean,
Okay,
we're
I'll be
gonna have-
happy.
You
Okay.
don't- You're not gonna be here either, right? First, so we'll have 2 absentees at least at that meeting.
you two better show up.
Oh, yeah, we'll be here.
Okay.
Hope Scott's well.
Now, for more intriguing and wonderful things, Mr. Doe. Okay, before you get up here, I want to discuss with the board and with Werner, we have gotten significant modifications since we closed the public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
And so there are two choices in terms of the public hearing, I'm sorry, our choices would be, we can't have a public hearing tonight because it hasn't been noticed as such. The two choices would be that we accept or reject his last version, not this version, or we allow him to present, and then we have to reopen the public hearing the next time. So,
I think it seems wasteful to reject. I think just allowing the amended application to proceed. I think have Steve present tonight,
yes,
the amendments to what has transpired over the course of the last month or so, or month and a half. And I think we need to reopen the public hearing because
he
of the
says,
changes.
well, of course he won't be here, but,
No, that's just my opinion. So.
You mean reopen in September?
Yeah, it'd have to, it would
Yeah,
have to be the
because we
next
can't have
item.
it tonight. We didn't
Yeah.
notice it.
Okay.
So-
think
I
that
do
sounds reasonable.
anticipate, well, of course, some of the information you're coming with is going to be revealed for the first time tonight.
Yes.
I haven't seen, but with respect to, one of the studies that you commissioned and all. But
Yes.
in some of the cases, you've made some changes that I thought responded to some of the inputs at the public meeting. I'm going to ask you, what did the person who spoke to this think about the change you made? And if the answer is, I don't know, we got to have a public hearing to hear that, then we'll have to have a public hearing, but.
Okay.
I guess.
You know what I'm saying?
Werner
Those are,
wishes
Yeah,
to speak.
so I just want to give you the verbiage, of your general provisions, just so we're clear, and,
All right.
whenever you all look at me and say, all right, where'd you pull this from? Right, where'd you get this from? So what I'm reading from, this is just your planning
bylaws.
board rules and regulations.
Yep.
And so under 1403, your general provisions, so at your conclusion of hearing, which is what occurred at the last meeting, so the public hearing is closed by a vote of the board. It says no further testimony or other evidence shall be received except as follows. So you either you leave, the record is left open. It says upon a request made prior to the close of the hearing, presiding member may permit persons participating in the hearing to file written statements within the board for inclusion in the record. Such time and upon such notification to the other participants as the presiding member shall determine. I think in English what that means is that you can close a public hearing, but you can allow the applicant to kind of continue in the conversation, in the deliberations. Your second option is the hearing reopened, and I think that's,
That's what we're talking
that's
about
what
here.
you're talking about here. It says, at any time prior to final decision, which is kind of where we're at, the chair or a majority of the voting members may reopen the record for further proceedings after proper notice has been given to interested persons and to the public. So, to me, that essentially says is we have to just notice up another public hearing that you're going to reopen, and that acceptance of other evidence.
Yeah, if the public hasn't been advised of the changes that were made in response to their input, then it's not fair to spring it on them and say at a moment's notice, you're okay with this, you need a chance to look at it.
But we can
Consider.
reopen based on the amended proposal.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, you can reopen. We just have to,
Based on a vote of the,
you just have to
we'd have to
vote to do
that.
it, and you essentially direct us to renotice it.
Renotice it for next time.
Yeah.
So is there a question as to whether Steve can speak tonight or not?
I don't believe so.
No,
Okay. All right.
no
I
question
didn't-
about that.
I didn't think so either.
or whether we want him to.
If he wants to.
I know he wants to.
He can't resist speaking here.
I think,
I
I
would like
prefer
to
to,
hear
I mean,
what he
we
has
still
to
have the
say.
public here that were at the last meeting. I think it's worth them to see this again. I believe some of them had conversations with Werner, and we emailed documents to the town, and I know that information was passed to people that requested it, so I know it's not new to them.
Good.
Even the stuff that was emailed Tuesday has been sent to abutters, so I know it's out there, so it's not, new information.
I guess where our hands are kind of tied is, if, from what Werner just read, the conclusion of hearing where the record is left open, I'm not sure that the record was ever left open, so I'm not sure we can accept any other testimony until we actually
Reopen.
reopen
We
the
have to
public hearing.
reopen.
Yeah,
Not the public hearing, we reopen the deliberation or whatever. We reopen the review.
What? We haven't closed the
We have.
deliberation.
We haven't
I don't think
closed the
closed
deliberation.
review,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
I'll just read it again, sorry. Conclusion of hearing. A public hearing is closed by vote of the board, and no further testimony or other evidence shall be received except as follows. 1, record left open. Upon a request made prior to the close of the hearing, the presiding member may permit persons participating in the hearing to file written statements with the board for inclusion in the record, such time and upon such notice to the other participants as the presiding member shall determine. So I take that.
This is more than a written input.
I know.
Yeah.
And I know you're here, and I'm sorry. That's just where I'm coming down on. I'm not sure we can take any.
No, I
Testimony.
don't think it says you can't do that. It says you have to reopen the public hearing.
Public hearing, yeah.
Oh, and you're saying you can't do that unless you notice it.
Right.
Right, so
So,
procedurally, you can't open a public hearing tonight.
On the spot.
Okay.
Right.
Right, you can't open it on the spot, you know,
right.
you can.
Understood. Can we listen to Steve, or does he come back at the
I don't
beginning?
I have I have no particular issues with that piece if the board decides that, you know, that they wanna do that. I'm just saying that the public, you know, the public hearing piece of it based on your
Understood.
bylaws here,
Yeah.
has to be noticed and
Yes,
reopened.
but we can
I think that's within,
unanimously agree to
I think that's
listen to
That's
within the
Steve.
fine.
board's-
That's, all right, so that's where I was going.
That's
is
within the
can
board's
we
discretion.
actually hear this? And if it's up to our discretion, then
Well,
he's here. I'd rather
I'm
hear
the
it.
presiding member, I think. and I like the idea of listening to Steve, so,
Sounds good to me.
okay. So we're going, hearing no objections. Okay, I'm going to allow us to listen to Steve, and then Lisa will, you know, for the notice of the next meeting, this will be a reopened public hearing on the topic.
Okay.
So, Mr. Doe,
All right.
Point of order, sir. Did you reopen the hearing? Is that
the-
what the board just did?
we're going to listen to the presentation. We did not reopen the public hearing because we can't until 2 weeks from today, or 3 weeks,
Well, I know
whatever it
there's
is.
a lot of abutters that are interested in this, and I'm suggesting to you that it's not fair for you to hear this witness in, ahead of a formal decision to reopen and notice to the abutters.
So
I'm not
you
sure
would
I-
not like to hear this tonight? Is that what you're saying?
You're saying you don't want to hear
You're
it?
not interested?
I'm not interested in the board formally hearing it. If this gentleman wants to talk, I'd be happy to sit here and listen.
It is going to be on video.
Yeah.
It is available for anyone to stream.
And that's all he's doing. We are going to take no action other than to make the comment that we will reopen the public hearing next time.
My name is Jack Hunt. I am one of the abutters.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I'm also a lawyer by trade.
Yeah.
so,
And it does, and a former member of this board, actually, and it does seem to me that electronic record or a video is not really a substitute for those abutters who are interested, knowing that you're gonna hear this and come in and listen to it so they can respond at that time.
I am somewhat baffled,
Is,
but I would like you to go to the microphone for the future because everybody needs to hear it.
is
But-
the application considered complete?
We already
Yes,
deemed,
long time ago.
that complete.
Yes, a long time ago, we considered it complete,
Okay.
okay? We closed the public hearing at the end of the last meeting. So what, as a result of the last meeting, Mr. Doe worked with a number of inputs from the abutters to come up with a revised plan. And now he wanted to present that to us as if this were the initial, once again, an initial review of this revised thing.
And in the public agenda, it says that this will be continued deliberation.
It is continued deliberations, yeah. Well, I mean, if we vote to reopen the public hearing next time, the choices are, he can present this now, or he can present it 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks, whatever it is.
Tom, I think it should be both. If he's
Yeah.
gonna present it,
Present it
he
again.
needs to present it again next week, so, or 2 weeks from now.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
To
Because
Jack, to
without
Mr.
him-
Hunt's point.
Yeah,
Without him presenting, the board has no opportunity to ask questions.
right. It gets, well,
Right.
we can ask questions, of course, the beginning of next time. This gives us what we're getting, if we talk now, is getting the board's initial questions out of the way also. If the board has
I'm
initial.
not sure we
No,
can
you
ask
can't
questions.
question.
Okay.
I don't think we
So-
can,
So I don't think we can do anything today then.
we can listen.
I think it would be much more reasonable and more proper,
Okay.
okay, to wait on this presentation until we reopen the public hearing and ask Steve to get up and look at the revisions that they've made in response to public comments, and then let the public have their say, and then continue
Right.
deliberations.
We would, so the order would be, Steve would present, the board would ask questions, as we always do, even at a public hearing, before
Right.
we'd open the public hearing, and then hear from the public, and then we would close the public hearing and continue our deliberations, but there would be no more input from you particularly at that point, other than,
It's,
Unless you leave the record open. You have that option.
yeah,
Yeah, you could leave it open.
I don't
I
even
think
know what
that's-
that means.
Well, it essentially, what it means is that you can be specific about what it is that you're leaving the record open for. You know, that's been done in the past, you know, where, you know, you've allowed, you know, the record to be open for, you know, for the presenter to, you know, provide clarifying comments. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's, you know, that's what, and board has also in the past left it open for very specific, you know, for things that were very specific, you know, as far as receipt of information. That's been done before in the past, but, you know, it's been verbalized at the meeting that the record was being left open for.
We did not do that.
You know, for this specific, you know, for this specific reason.
right.
And this was submitted on August 14th, so that's really only a week. That would give an additional 2 weeks, or in this case, 3 weeks,
Yeah.
for people to review the amended application. Because don't we need to have 2 weeks?
Yeah, it really should be a 2-week window for the public to have access to the documents
Yeah.
and
In this
all
case,
of the
it'll be-
materials.
So that alone answers the question.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Make one more comment, and I think the board owes, what's the right word? We're obliged to take care of both the abutters and the public, and I think you spoke to that, Mr. Hunt, but I think we also have an obligation to the applicant here to not waste their time.
right.
We've had a turnaround. The information I have looked at is all addressing specific comments that were brought up, although we didn't say the words that we were leaving the record open. I think we certainly anticipated hearing back on the issues that I'm expecting to hear tonight. And so I feel badly about exercising Mr. Doe.
But the revisions that you have are substantial.
Yeah, I
They're not
would agree with that.
They're
That's
not
right.
minor.
That's right.
And the public needs to have some input on that.
And I wouldn't deny that either, and I think we're saying, and we're gonna do that next time. The only thing I'm suggesting is that if there's a way without jeopardizing the legality of this, that we could hear what has been prepared and give initial feedback on that, it might be doing a service to the applicant and not a disservice to the public. And I'd be interested in hearing any members of the public that wanted to respond to my comment.
Well, you
Hey,
can't-
Tom, if
you
you're all
can't
right with that.
Because you don't have a public hearing open.
Well, I have people here that,
Yeah, but,
We haven't opened anything, we're just talking.
right,
yeah, you can't, you can't.
Go.
Tom, yeah.
Again, my name is Jack Hunt, I'm the
No,
butter.
you
He,
can't.
Tom has just okayed it, Nina. You can't say he
Oh.
can't.
Have you?
Yeah.
I-
I think it's improper.
We haven't opened anything. We haven't even
There's
opened
no
discussion
public
on
hearing
point number
currently
4.
active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked a question, and I asked for someone from the audience to address it. Maybe that was improper of me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay.
Mr. Hunt, quickly.
Yeah. My concern is abutters who are not here.
Right.
Who have not seen the document. I took the initiative of getting the revised application by email, and I appreciate that. But that's me. And I see like about 3 abutters
Yep.
are here tonight, and there are a lot more than 3 abutters. So not even talking about members of the public that may be interested that are not abutters. I don't feel like I'm here to represent the absent abutters.
Okay.
And you really haven't had enough time to study it either.
Okay.
Y-
They're
Yeah,
required to have 2 weeks.
okay.
Duly noted, thank you.
Thank you.
Point taken, thank you.
So,
There's going to be no public comment tonight.
no,
That's what I'm here.
that's correct. There could not possibly be any public comment on it tonight.
And there won't be any comment from the applicant because we've got a date of August 14th and we need 2 weeks of notice.
Okay, so.
So I think the
I
best
can
thing
go
to
back
do
Boston
is,
right now.
Yeah, see, that isn't, yeah.
so,
Just for the record, there wasn't going to be any public comment, period. We closed that 2 weeks ago, so.
All right.
Apologies.
okay. So I guess what I need, do I need a motion to reopen the public hearing next time? Or can I do that as presiding member, just do it? I'll take the
I
motion.
think you can do that.
Yeah, I
Mr.
mean, I think you
Presiding member,
can-
But I'll give you a motion to
Either one, you can do
reopen the
both.
public hearing.
Okay, second?
Well,
Can I ask a question? Is the applicant, are we allowed to? I'm asking if I can, I know you guys are like on uncharted waters for yourself. I can see the trepidation in every face there going, I don't know how to answer anything at this point, so.
I would say we'll see it in 3 weeks, Sean.
Thank you.
And please ask, Werner a question afterwards if that's helpful, but you can't talk to the board, is what I'm hearing.
In short, I think that the whole evolution of this project with everybody's input has gotten a lot better for everybody.
Definitely.
And I hate to miss an opportunity to move forward in that direction.
Yeah, well.
I think
it
we
re-
missed it last
Public hearing,
time.
doing the public hearing next time will not, that'll just mean Steve has less talking to do. Because
Or
he's
more.
probably got 3
doubt
other
that.
things also on for that night. But,
I might have one.
one other anyway, yes. So,
Can we get cushions for these chairs next time?
Hell, no, the meetings are going long enough as it is.
Pick it up with a select.
We switched here.
Might encourage people to stick around for too long.
I think that's why they give you those chairs.
Darn right.
okay, well,
So did we formally, or have we formally
I think
reopened
I did it as presiding member.
as the
Is that
chair?
okay?
Yep, no, that's fine. Just want to make sure that was
But we didn't have to vote.
done.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which brings us, shall we say, to 190702, Paul and Lisa Henderson, Peterson Design Group authorized agent for approval to remove an existing 2-family dwelling and rebuild it in a more conforming location. No lip on the front of that podium.
Yeah, it's like a dribble glass.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Peterson from Peterson Design Group in Kennebunk. Paul and Lisa Henderson are here tonight. They've owned a home in Kennebunkport for almost 20 years, and they recently purchased the property at 2 Main Street with the intent of having a further investment in the town, and have just recently moved to Kennebunkport full-time, and I saw that the cars now have Maine plates on them, so they're official.
Congratulations.
Welcome.
So, when they bought this property, I think the intent was to renovate it. And the more time we spent looking at the viability of trying to fix it up, it quickly became apparent that it has some structural, in every sense of the word, flaws. It's a house that's been heavily modified over time. It's a legal two-family home. Plus, there's a freestanding cottage, so it's two families in the sense that it's 3 stories of living space, and the lower 2 floors are one unit, and the upper floor is another unit. And there's a freestanding cottage that, I don't know, it's not a separate home. It doesn't have a kitchen or anything. But the first floor level of the main house is below the flood elevation and has flooded twice in recent history, to the point where, I mean, it's finished living space, but the floor has buckled. It's a cement floor that's tiled. When you walk down in the lower level, you can see that the floor has cracked and heaved. So we thought about ways to try to fix that house, but the foundation is really complicated in that it's a slab on grade at the water side, and then it's banked up against a big retaining wall at the street side, and it sits essentially at street level on the middle floor, on the sidewalk level. It's there's only one step up. So one of the major issues too is that not only is it in village residential, it's in shoreline zone, and it's within RP, because the whole property, bless you, is within 75 feet of the high water mark. So there's no spot in this lot that's not in RP. What makes it even more complicated is that almost the whole cottage and a portion of the existing house are literally in or over the water. So we're trying to make this a better situation all around. So you can see in the documentation that I sent you, we documented the existing house, all levels, and calculated the area and volume. And I met with Werner and got his wisdom on what would be the best possibility for reconstructing this home. The Hendersons do want to keep a 2-family situation, but in a different setup. That cottage would go away, so there would only be one structure on the property, and it would be 2 units, but side by side. And it would be constructed completely on upland area, so no portion of it would be over the water, and no portion of it would be anywhere near the flood zone. We'd want to make it so that it was on a pier-type foundation, a wash-through foundation. So from Main Street, so here's the thing. They really were charmed by the house from the Main Street side. You know, it contributes to the streetscape of downtown. I get that. So what we've tried to do is design a new structure that is as conforming as possible, or as least non-conforming as possible, but sort of is an homage to the existing house in that it doesn't try to be something really flashy or contemporary or anything other than a cousin to what was there. So having said that, we also wanted to make it viable as far as parking goes. Right now, you know, the town mandates that each dwelling unit needs 2 parking spaces, and right now it's almost impossible to get 4 parking spaces in that parking area the way it's laid out. So we tried to tease that apart and make 2 parking spaces. Two parking spaces on the right-hand side of what would be one of the units, which is aesthetically packaged to look like a barn. So we've made this look like a house, a Cape-style house and a barn. And we've tried to keep in the spirit of making it look like a single-family home. The entrances are very separate. There's what appears to be a main entrance for the A unit, if you want to call it that. And then the entrance to the smaller unit is around the side that has 2 parking spaces nearby. And we're creating a parking pad that's 2 spaces to the left-hand side of the A unit that would be for that unit. So this requires a curb cut change, and I talked to Mike Claus at the time. He said because that portion of Main Street is technically Route 9, it's really an MDOT issue, so we've applied for a driveway relocation, opening relocation with MDOT, and they're supposed to come out within the next 10 days to take a look at that. We have very good sight lines and no proximity to other driveways or major intersections. And we've also spoken with the police chief, the Deputy Chief Moses. He said he had no issue with it, but also no jurisdiction to say anything about it because it was an MDOT question. So I met with him, and he said, although he had no jurisdiction, that he could see no issue with it. So you'll notice when you look at the calculations that we've done that the existing house decreases the lot coverage, even in the upland area, and certainly overall. There's no lot coverage in the non-upland area proposed. It's also smaller in overall square footage of living area and in volume smaller. So I think all in all, it's a win-win as far as meeting the allowances in the land use ordinance. And it gets us out of the flood zone, which I think is the best thing for that building. I noticed on the agenda that it mentioned that it was a single-family home being replaced with a single-family home. That's technically not correct. Our application was for a two-family.
The agenda was
been corrected.
changed.
Oh, it changed, okay,
That's
good.
correct.
And we've also applied for a permit by rule with DEP for activity within 75 feet of the resource. So that's in the works, too. Do you want me to flip through every page, or have you've got a condensed version everyone has in their application? Does anyone have questions for me?
What is the elevation?
The elevation
The
of,
highest elevation of a house?
the highest elevation of the house is roughly a foot taller than the existing house, but way below 30 feet. Yeah, way below the 30 feet that's allowed. I'm sorry, that's not a technical answer, but I think it's something like 26 feet high from the average original grade.
Is this really a two-family home in the recent past?
It's been for a long time.
Are there separate entrances for the two families?
There's a single front door that goes into it's like a house of hallways here when you go inside.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So there's a single front door that goes into an entryway, that goes into the door into a hall.
Right,
That has a door that goes into this unit,
right.
which then has stairs that go down to the lower level, which is walkout. And then from this hallway, you go upstairs to a door at the top of the stairs, and that second floor is a unit.
Separate keyed entry
Yeah,
up
yeah.
there. Thank you.
It's had two tenants, when the Hendersons purchased it, it had two tenants.
Got it.
Yeah, and it's zoned, Werner can tell you, it's zoned as for
No,
tax assessment purposes.
No, I saw that. It was, it looked like a lot was crowded into a space, but I couldn't tell about whether it really was being used by two families.
The
So
bigger
I got it.
unit is pretty big. It's got, if you look at the floor plan, it's got most of the first floor and all of the lower level. And then, who used the cottage historically? Do you know which unit?
We use it as part of the main,
The bigger unit?
it's just like, it's a bedroom. It's a
Mhm. Okay.
It's almost like an accessory apartment, but it's a separate dwelling.
It's a separate building, right, which is why we're trying to consolidate to make it as conforming as possible.
I'm saying where you're using the cottage as part of the main house, it's
Yeah.
still, you've got an upstairs, separate apartment.
Yeah, that's right, that's a third
Separate
thing.
dwelling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are 2 units plus that cottage right now.
So is it correct, you're gonna deconstruct the entire, everything that's on the lot now?
Mhm.
And then you said you're gonna drive piles to make the floor, support the floor above the flood zone?
That's right. The first floor of the proposed building will be roughly at the floor height of the middle floor of the current building. So that whole lower floor will be going away completely.
So you're not gonna fill, you're just gonna have
No,
piles?
it'll be like the houses we do at the beach that are on piers. Like when a house on piers, sits in a dune where it gains a whole story over the house. That's basically the same effect, like at Goose Rocks, where you see a story exposed with piers at the street side, and then it banks up and it's just above grade at the beach side. It's the converse here, the inverse, where you'd have the high side is the street side, and then it drops a whole story. And the lower side, when you're standing down at water level, you'd be looking at the piers. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Is the thought that the new building would be only used by 2 families?
Yes.
I was taken with the creativeness of this
Oh.
5 bedrooms and
Yeah, it's
5 baths and 2 half baths, and it looked like.
No more than 2, if that's what you mean. I mean, the option is that it could be used by 1 family if it wanted it to be. They physically connect through that link.
Yes.
So that if the desire were to use it as a single unit for a big family, that is possible, but no more than 2 families.
It looked like it could be set up to use as separately let units for 5 different occupants.
Oh, no.
In the main house.
No.
Each of whom would have their own ensuite and.
No, that's just
would share a
honestly,
common area.
that is the nature of the beast these days. Everybody wants ensuite bathrooms with every bedroom.
So there's no separate keying on each of those bedrooms?
No,
or
definitely
anything like
not.
that?
No. And we just did a house at Goose Rocks that's like 1,600 square feet with 3 bedrooms and 3.5 bathrooms. It's, people pack them in. Everybody wants a bathroom.
You're probably aware of some of the discussion that's gone on with this village parcel and the thought for affordable housing and what could be done for senior living and the
Oh,
like.
right.
And this type of model where you have a common living space and
Oh. Like congregate living almost, or
be a nice college dorm, that type of thing.
I'm pretty sure that's not
very
what
high
the Hendersons
price.
have in mind, but
Understood.
no.
I was intrigued by it. Very clever. That's all I had.
Okay, any more questions on this one?
I have some comments.
Okay, go.
This is all glass that's facing the mill pond.
I'll open the back.
Not sure.
It's a combination of sliding glass doors and windows.
Well, the mill pond is a significant bird area, and it's part of the bird corridor where migratory birds move up and down. I live on the Kennebunk River, so I watch them all the time. You are going to murder birds left and right with that glass if it isn't bird-friendly or you don't change the design. In fact, it's going to be so significant that you may violate the Federal Migratory Bird Act.
Can you unpack that a little more for me?
Yeah. Federal Migratory Bird Act is part of a treaty between 5 different countries, Canada, Mexico, et cetera, that provides serious fines for basically killing migratory birds. This includes shorebirds as well as any bird that migrates, bluebirds, warblers, pipers, et cetera. When they crash into windows, they get killed. Most of them get killed because they build up speed. What's going to happen there is across the mill pond, what you're facing is a bunch of trees. And those trees will reflect in the glass, and the birds will think it's open space. And there's a lot of space there for them to get up speed and just go crashing into those windows. If you don't change the design to bird-friendly design, for example, balconies and there's a lot on the web about how to make bird-friendly design. UNE just made bird-friendly design on the new student center they put in. And several states are starting to require it. There's a statute in front of the House and the Senate to require all federal buildings that bird-friendly design. Basically, when you kill a migratory bird, it's generally a couple of $1,000s per bird penalty or 6 months to a year in jail. And in Toronto, there has been litigation on designs that have been very detrimental to birds, charging them under the Federal Migratory Bird Act. Now, this will probably not happen in a residence, but what you're doing is you're setting up to kill birds. It either needs to be bird-friendly glass, or it needs to be a different design, or you need to have something that reflects back that the birds can see, either line poles or dots on the windows, or some sort of design in there built in the glass or etched in the glass, so that the birds can see it's not open area.
So do muntins in the glass? Do the fact that there are muntins in the glass, doesn't that give the birds some idea that
You mean
it's not-
panes?
Yeah.
No, because it's still too big a space. You need between around 2 to 4 inches between the lines that they see.
So how does, with all due respect, how does this not affect every house that's built on the water?
It does. It does. We lose 1 billion birds a year in this country. 40 to 50% of them are from residential buildings. I have the same problem living along the Kennebunk River. I have UV paint that I put on my windows, and I keep my feeders very close so the birds can't get up speed when they hit the window. And I hear them hit quite often, but they're usually okay.
So I'm trying to figure out how I could modify the glass, because I know that with every window manufacturer, if you modify the glass, like if you put a solar tint film, or if
They
you,
don't guarantee it,
it voids the warranty.
and it has to go on the outside. But there is bird-friendly glass. There are several manufacturers. There's one in the US.
Window manufacturers?
Yes.
Like Pella, Marvin Anderson?
No, not. One of those can get bird-friendly glass, but I forget who it is. But there are manufacturers of bird-friendly glass that will put that in. There are different types of bird-friendly glass. It's
So
more expensive.
is it usually a
window.
retrofit situation or new construction? The
You can
bird-friendly
do it
glass?
for new construction. They'll build the windows for you.
Who's that? Who's they?
Ornelux is one of the companies. I think they're in Germany. Just go to the Audubon Society and have them talk about bird strikes, and they'll give you the manufacturers. You'll get all sorts of information on it. But I can tell you right now, I won't be here, so you won't have my vote against you, but I would never vote for anything like that. I think it's extremely detrimental to the wildlife.
So can you tell me, if this were your project to design and you owned this property on the water, what would you do?
I'd spend the extra money and get bird-friendly glass. I'm sorry I didn't in my windows, because now I have to put extra stuff up there.
But it could be done with appliques as well.
It can be done with appliques.
The reason that this, your point about why isn't every house affected, and to a degree, I mean, Nina's right, to a degree, every house is, but I just know as you know, everyone in town goes by this house, and that area there, especially in the fall and in the winter months, is always full of ducks.
It's
And,
full of
it's,
birds, all kinds of birds.
They're always taking off and flying over the road and back, and so it just does kind of strike you as a more likely here than other places. It's kind of a flyway for them.
Yeah, it's
So-
definitely a corridor down that Mill Street.
You clearly are an expert on this, so
I'm not an expert
Well,
on
you
it,
know a
but
lot
I
more than most
read
people
a lot
do.
about it.
can you give me 4 or 5 things that you think are remediation options? So you talked about bird-friendly glass, that's one.
Bird-friendly glass, there are very many different types. There's etchings in glass,
Can you explain that to me?
Inserts in glass, so they etch it in a certain way so that you see out easily. There are tints on glass, there's stuff they make to put on glass. The cheapest stuff is the stuff I just sent for, little dots that go right down, so you can still see through very easily. You know, it doesn't affect your visual effect, but it does stop the birds. There are simple things like decals that you put up in the windows, but you have to put so many of them. There's UV paint that you don't see very easily. I mean, the sun has to be at a certain angle.
Yeah, I'm thinking of things that I can recommend to a client that won't then void their window warranty, and after they've spent X amount of money on windows, you know.
There are what's called, I think, Zen curtains, which are things you put up that have stripes of cord that come down, so the birds see that and void the window.
Eric, wouldn't 50% of these windows have screens on them?
Mhm.
Screens help.
Please help.
Yep.
Yeah.
They'll
lot.
still hit.
Yeah, they would, in fact. That's a good
You're
point,
in
Paul.
an area where you're going to see dead birds constantly. And it's very sad to see a warbler that's dead, you know. There you go. Steve knows about it because I complained about this in another resource area.
It's a very glassy front here now today, but the existing house,
Yeah, it's funny, the existing house is almost all glass too.
but it does have some screens on it.
Yes,
So that's
yes.
And you could do some things with lattice or balconies, which you're not doing here, or plantings, which aren't going to work here.
This is the side, it's funny, this is the side that faces the water now, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picture windows,
Yes,
of which.
there are. Nobody ever thought about this.
No, I'm
And
just,
now they're beginning to be very, very aware, and architects are beginning to be very aware. And if you go on the web, you'll see a lot of buildings that are designed with balconies and areas so that it shades the windows so there's no reflection for the birds to see.
so can you unpack that one for me? How, can you explain how a balcony makes that better? So I can,
There are overhangs
Understand.
and balconies that help to shadow and shade the windows so the birds don't go into them.
so it's casting a shadow is the advantage there?
It's an advantage because you don't get the reflection of the trees on the other side on the window, so the birds don't think they're flying into the trees.
Can I make a suggestion? I think you're trying to draw your answer from people that aren't experts, They're just people that know more. You
Well,
know,
the thing is, if
they're-
the question is raised, I guess
No,
clearly, Ms.
look-
Perlmutter
look-
has a lot of passion about this, and I
No,
figure she
and-
has a lot of info
I'm
too.
And I think it's
passionate
very
about it
valuable.
Because we're losing birds so fast.
But I just Googled, you know, just sitting here,
Yeah.
the UNE project that I know last year was featured in the Portland Press Herald, and it says it's their commons, Riposh Commons. It's a UNE Student Center designed with glass to keep birds safe. And that's from 2018. There's an article on it. That might be a starting point.
Okay, thank you.
Who did that? I would.
I just didn't
I
know
know
it was
when I
readily
did some
available.
reading at Nina's, you know, urging the last time, what I came away thinking was, the reason everyone doesn't have this is because it's a price adder,
Yep.
right? And when you're doing a new construction, especially one that's entirely in the RP zone, and this is small enough that it wouldn't
This is
it
from
wouldn't break the
Audubon?
bank. I don't think it would break the bank, and
Yeah.
it'd be kind of a cool thing to do if you can find a way to do it and not void a warranty, obviously. you know.
Yeah, that's the only thing
That's unacceptable.
I couldn't
Right.
suggest something that would do
No,
that.
you
'cause
can't
that
stay in
would-
business.
You can
But I
do
think
it
you can
without
get
voiding
original
warranties.
equipment manufacturer windows. I don't think I know Anderson and Marvin, they don't do this.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not high volume
I'd
stuff.
stay away from Marvin anyway, those are my windows.
All right, anyway.
They're 20% more than anybody else too.
But I'm sure, you know, the owners, the Hendersons are aware, and everyone knows what a beautiful spot that is for birds. And we've already had some problems across the way where a number of years ago, a number of trees were cut down and then needed to be replanted because they were cut down
That's right.
inside the resource zone, and they just, you know, didn't. There you go. It's a sensitive spot. It's a beautiful spot that you obviously appreciate and we all appreciate.
And an incredibly clever and innovative design. It's not that we're saying, don't do this. This
I
is
understand,
so
yeah.
much
Yeah.
improvement over what's there now.
It's a beautiful design.
It is.
clever.
I'm just saying the windows are gonna kill birds. This is an article, and I think this is one by Audubon on architectural design, and give you a starting point anyway.
Something I can hang on to and
Yes.
bring back to you? Thank you.
No, you don't even have to bring it back. I'm downloading these things all the time.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
All right, so what do you suggest? Should I, do you,
I would just research a bit,
mm-hmm,
see what the cost is to put in those, or some other design, and talk it over with the people who want to build this house. I'm sure they don't want to kill birds. You know, you're gonna be out the window watching those birds,
Is-
you're gonna have all that
is
grass.
this the only facade that you're concerned about?
That's the worst one,
The mill side,
the mill side.
mill pond
Yeah.
side, right?
That's gonna be the worst one right there.
Okay.
So does that mean potentially that we could have bird-safe windows on that side and normal windows
Yeah.
on the front side?
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
other three sides?
The other person.
And then if you find they're crashing in there, you could just put up a couple of decals.
Okay. All right, we'll take that under advisement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Do you have other questions?
I just have a quick question. This is obviously a very busy road
Yeah,
and traffic backs up. What's the plan, and this isn't really before us, I suppose, but what's the plan for construction? You know, what
that's a good question.
how are you gonna manage that? Are you
Yeah.
gonna do it in the winter when it's?
Off-season.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Well, demolition first.
Ready to start tomorrow.
Demolition.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in the summer.
Yeah, death wish. Demolish the existing house first, which will open up some space, you know,
Yeah.
the higher portion of the lot. This is a good
But not
staging area,
from the water.
and then this will be a staging area, but yeah, it's tricky. I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta say, not dissimilar to like beach lots that have nowhere to go, you know, no space.
You're not planning on bringing a barge or anything like that?
They can't. There's no way
No,
to get a
can't
barge
bring it
into
up.
there.
Unless it can fit through a culvert.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fair point. Or
Yeah, yeah.
building something temporary there, no. Okay.
Yeah, no,
It's all
that's
done-
not.
all done
that-
from the street.
Not at this moment. You know, it's a lot like the project that we brought before you at 25 Pier Road.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's similar setting, very tight,
Yeah.
not a lot of
But
access.
it doesn't have Main Street in front of it.
No.
Yeah, the traffic.
No, I mean,
pattern is different.
I'm excited about this spot. I think it's I think that house needs a lot of love that
a showcase.
was deferred to the point where it became unviable. But I think that the solution is a good neighbor.
It's a very elegant solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's no historic district in Kennebunkport, but
You're making it less non-conforming.
totally. And flood safe. That's really the major thing, is making it flood proof.
We've all seen that cottage at high tide.
Oh, yeah.
Twice apparently it's flooded, like water
I'm amazed it's only
in the
been
building.
twice. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so, yeah.
Tide, you're in a boat.
So I'm feeling better about that, it's a good neighbor and it's most conforming as possible and flood safe. And smaller in volume and area and lot coverage. It's kind of a win-win-win.
Should we take a vote to see if this is complete? Do we believe this is?
I believe it's complete.
I would move that we accept this application as complete.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Great.
Okay, so, September 4th.
Yes, sir.
We'll have a public hearing.
Yep.
On this. And hopefully you'll have some answers for Nina, who actually won't be here on September 4th.
That's right.
But
Yeah,
we will be listening for her.
I was gonna say, thanks a lot. You load me up and then you're not gonna be here, huh?
I'm gonna be watching the video.
Uh-oh. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any volunteers? I'll take it if no one else, but. Volunteered you recently for something, I don't know.
I was gonna read Neil's, yeah.
Hmm?
I was gonna read Neil's.
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
that's true. Well, it's gotta be, I'll do it, that's fine. Okay. Now that brings us to other business. And I know this public hearing, we're getting so much public interested in this particular item.
As they all walk in.
But We
Thank you all.
have modified the subdivision regulations to
Yeah.
correspond to the selectmen's directives on the subject of accepting roads, and so we'll ask the public about it, and the public is not here, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And I guess at this point, we now officially move to change the document,
Yes.
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded?
Okay, all in favor? Okay. Which leaves we
What's the
to
mechanism?
read a finding of facts, unless
What's the mechanism for doing that?
she's got it.
Lisa already has
Lisa
it.
already has it, right?
Yeah,
She can
yeah, so
publish
what
it
we
now.
have is, we have the
You
document.
don't need anything else, is what
No,
you're
I
saying.
mean,
We'll
we-
change the date. of
Yeah,
course.
the date gets changed. Let me just make a note on that.
That's the only
Yep.
substantive change, I think.
And then, we'll circulate, a final copy, without the markups and
Thank you
things
very much.
associated with that, so
Perfect.
that everybody has that.
All
Update
right.
the website. We're also in the process right now as well. I mean, we're going through a codification process, and so that's, gonna be a little bit tricky, in the sense that, this document will also wind up, being incorporated, within that, overall web design, so.
Good.
So it's good that we get these things.
I just liked having it done. I know we've got a subdivision, pending.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna
I
be on the
don't
docket
think
for
it-
next time, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, at least from what I see, what we have kind of in the pipeline, it's good to get this squared away, because then at least, we're able to get that out on the web.
One less thing.
Puts folks on notice that, we've got a revised version. There's
Will that
nothing.
be effective on the subdivision coming in though, since the application's been filed before we voted on it?
This is just
The
clarifying what the-
applications that you have coming in, I don't believe are affected by these changes.
Because
Um,
there's the subdivision that Jim Logan's bringing in is the one we
Right.
did the walk on.
It's a private road.
Right, it's a private road already, so they're not gonna,
And there's no proposal to make
there's
it
no
public.
proposal
No
to
proposal
make.
to make
I
it
mean,
That's
that's the
nothing to
only
do
thing
with
that this
It's
says
already
is,
That's right.
private.
we gotta
That's
ask them to clarify, you sure this is, you're not proposing this for a public road? And if the answer is,
Yep.
no, I'm not, then we're done. That's all
Right,
it
that's
asks
all
you
it
to do,
says.
is to
That's
bring
right.
it up.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, I have a finding of facts
Thank you, Ron. That's
to
great.
read here. Application of the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, Timothy Spang, authorized agent, to add a labyrinth to the existing trails at Emmons Preserve. Finding of facts. Followed a site plan pursuant to the land use ordinance held the 17th of July and a public hearing held the 21st of August 2019. The Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings and conditions and renders the following decision, subject to conditions enumerated below. 1. The owner is Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, in a letter dated June 25th, 2017. Tim Bradbury, 2017 or is that 19? I think that's a typo. I'll keep reading. I think I have to fix that, though.
But you can do that, just do it in pen and just.
Yeah, I know that.
Okay.
This was the date of the last meeting?
No, the date of, if somebody could look for when Tom Bradbury sent his letter.
Okay, all righty. I got it here somewhere, I'll find it.
Labyrinth?
Yeah, the labyrinth letter, anyway.
All right.
Okay. Property has a street address of 57 Gravelly Brook, Kennebunkport, Maine. Property is located in farm and forest and shoreland zones. Property consisting of 23 acres more or less is identified as map 25, block 1, lot 1A in the municipal tax assessor's map. The owner has demonstrated legal interest in the property, providing quitclaim deeds recorded in the York County Registry of Deed as Book 1124, pages 212 to 222, dated December 13th, 2001. Property consists of the trust headquarters building and a large nature preserve and trail system. And the application dated Yeah, it was 2019, thank you.
2019?
Yeah.
Let's, Niels, if you can grab it there.
Okay. In application dated October 25th, 24th, 2018, the applicant proposes to add a labyrinth to the trail systems. For the purposes of the land use ordinance, the proposed the labyrinth is defined as a structure pursuant to land use ordinance 2.2 definition, anything constructed with a fixed location above, below, or upon the surface of the ground. So it's upon the surface of the ground. It is therefore a structure. 9, a letter from attorneys Ralph Austin was provided to clarify that the labyrinth does not violate the terms of the deed of the property. 10, construction will use natural materials consisting of compacted stone dust with a base layer of gravel. Excavation of 3 to 6 inches of topsoil is required. Excavated materials will be used on site. Stones approximately 12 inches would be dug in the path of the labyrinth. The added structure covers roughly 1% of the shoreland zone property, which is well within land use ordinance requirements. Guidelines for decisions. Pursuant to requirements of Article 1010A, the Land Use Ordinance Guidelines for Decisions, the Planning Board shall approve a site plan unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following findings. Okay, which would compel denial. A, the proposal meets the definition and specific requirements set forth in the land use ordinance, will be in compliance with applicable state and federal laws. Finding yes. Fire safety hazards, finding not applicable. Exterior lighting not applicable. Buffers and on-site landscaping, neighboring properties not applicable. E, the proposed use will not have significant detrimental effect on use and peaceful enjoyment of abutting properties as a result of noise, vibration, fumes, odors, and the answer is yes, there's no problem. Provisions for vehicular loading and unloading and parking will not create hazards, not applicable. Proposed use will not have detrimental effect on the value of adjacent properties, no. We have property, finding yes. Design will not have significant flood hazards, finding yes. Adequate provision for disposal of wastewater, not applicable. Controlling erosion and sedimentation, yes. Adequate provision is made to handle storm water runoff, finding yes. Proposed water supply, there is no water supply, so that's not applicable. Adequate provision has been made for transportation, storage of hazardous substances, not applicable. Proposed use will not have adverse impact on significant vistas, that's a yes, it will not. The proposed use will not have unreasonable highway or public road congestion, not applicable. Off-site ways and traffic safely, the finding is not applicable. Okay, when the proposed development will be located within shoreland or resource protection, in addition to the requirements of the Land Use Article 10, the townwide regulations of Article 6, the performance standards for specific activities and land uses in Article 7, approval of the development will also require board makes positive findings based on information as follows. 1, safe and healthful, yes. No water pollution, yes. Okay, because, I mean, I just put a comment there that the labyrinthine path are more than 75 feet from the Batson River. Will adequately provide disposal of wastewater, will not have adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, etc. That's a yes. Will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of inland and coastal waters, yes. Will protect archaeological and historical resources as designated in the comp plan, not applicable. Will avoid problems associated with floodplain development and use, finding yes. its conformance with standards set forward in 5.6 of the land use ordinance, and that's a yes. Any negative finding means that the application has been denied, the application is otherwise complete. Conclusions. Article 1010A of the land use ordinance mandates the planning board shall approve a site plan unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial, and as noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision. Site plan identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval. 1. The applicant pursuant to 1012E shall notify the planning board prior to transfer of rights to construct an approved project. No assignment or transfer of rights to construct an approved project is valid without prior review and approval of the planning board of a new performance guarantee to ensure that any assignee or transferee has the financial capability to undertake or complete the project. 2. The applicant must record a copy of the decision and provide proof of such recordation in the form of a copy thereof attested by the Registrar of Deeds before any permits may issue, before any construction may commence, dated 21 August 2019 by the Planning Board.
So is this?
So initial the one change. That's, Nina
You got it
found it,
already?
thank you.
All right. Okay, just double checking.
We just have to sign this?
So we're signing, somebody needs to approve, to agree that it was a great finding of facts.
I move that it was a great finding of fact.
Second.
Excellent, yes, complete.
Okay.
All those in favor of accepting it?
So, so,
All right, now one more motion.
Really?
Motion to adjourn. I make a motion to
Second.
adjourn.
All in favor?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're done.